Chapter 5761. The reporting eunuch was so frightened that he immediately knelt before His Highness the Crown Prince. He cried miserably, "Your Highness, why you? You can't go around yelling about such a big secret for this lowly one to hear. You can just go and do it yourself in secret. Why are you yelling about it for this lowly one to hear? Should this lowly one report? Your Highness, don't kill this servant to silence me." The eunuch wailed as he crawled to Mou's feet and cried, "Your Highness, this servant swears that I definitely won't speak out of turn. Please spare this lowly one's life." "Why would I kill you?" Mou glanced at him. "Hurry back and report to my royal father. Pass on everything I just said to him without leaving out a single word. You have to hurry, understand? My men will enter the palace in 3 days to capture them. If you only return to the capital after 3 days, then it's your problem." The eunuch was so frightened that he hurriedly crawled out, shrieking along the way, back to the capital, back to the capital." Mou couldn't help but roll his eyes when he saw the eunuch flee in terror. He turned to ask his personal bodyguard 7 steps behind him, "Steam Bun, am I that scary?" The guard stood expressionlessly not far away and nodded. "Very scary." Shaolin blinked and shuffled to Mou's side. She poked him with a finger. "What? The old great king even specially sent a personal eunuch to reprimand you? Is it because Princess Huaiju's matter reached the old great king's ears?" Mou turned to glance at her and nodded with a slight smile. "Why are you so smart?" "That's right." Shaolin pursed her lips with a smug expression. "I've been smart since I was young. My sister also praises me." Mou snorted. "What do you think my eldest brother and eldest sister-in-law are doing? We've waited for them for so long, but we haven't seen them enter the city. Who knows?" Shaolin was also a bit angry at the mention of this. "Sister is such a baddie. She's so fickle. Isn't it enough to stroll around Quoto village for 3 days? Why do they have to stay for so long? Forget it. Let's pack up and leave tomorrow morning." "What's wrong? Has Princess Huaiju's but recovered?" Shaolin scooted over to Mou's side with a strange expression and glanced at him smilingly. "Oh, right. What did your father scold you about just now? Since you're so angry, something big must have happened." Mou gave her a sideways glance. "You want to know?" Jolin nodded vigorously. Mou turned around and smiled at her. She reached out and gently tapped her forehead. "I'm not telling you." Seeing him leave, Jolin was so angry that he waved his fist at his back. "Stinking brat. When I meet up with brother-in-law, I'll definitely ask him to teach him a lesson. How arrogant." "Princess." Qing Luo lowered her head and instructed the maidservants to change Princess Huaiju's dressing. She even personally brought a bowl of nourishing snow lotus soup to Princess Huaiju. Huaiju's spirit had been weak for the past 2 days. Today, with great difficulty, her body's injuries had slightly improved. Only then did she have some strength to speak. Qinyan sent word of this matter back." Qing Luo nodded. Guardchen was also worried that there was no way to treat the princess's injuries, so he thought of sending word to imperial concubine Li Fu. Princess Huaiju angrily slapped the mattress. I told him before, but he completely turned a deaf ear. What did Annie say?" "I heard that the great king sent a little eunuch to deliver a message to His Highness the Crown Prince." Princess Huaiju's expression turned somewhat ugly. "Princess, Guardchen requests an audience." At this moment, a maidservant came to report. Princess Huaiju's expression instantly darkened. "Let him in." As soon as Qinyan stepped into the room, he saw a bowl flying towards his head. "Princess." Qinyan hurriedly knelt down and dodged the attack of the bowl. I don't know what this subordinate did wrong to make the princess so angry. This subordinate knows his mistake. "You know your mistake?" Princess Huaiju was so angry that she clutched her stomach. "Didn't I tell you before not to ask Annie for help? After these few days, can't you tell what kind of person His Highness the Crown Prince is? That person was clearly amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. The harder you treated him, the more he would retaliate." Princess Huaiju's heart ached at the thought of this. It seemed that she could only be gentle on the way back to the capital, and see if she could pull His Highness's heart back to her. However, there was now an eyesore by His Highness's side. Princess Huaizhu looked at Chun Yin with a sullen expression. I want you to atone for your crimes. Are you willing to do so? Chun Yin hurriedly nodded. Princess, please give me your orders. As long as it is the princess's order, this subordinate will do it without hesitation. I don't need you to die, Princess Huaizhu said indifferently. Come closer. Chun Yin hurriedly took a few steps forward and carefully listened to Princess Huaizhu's orders in a low voice. He nodded repeatedly. These, those, and everything here. Move them all onto the carriage. Qing Luo pointed at a pile of cushions on the ground and ordered arrogantly. Be careful. These are all the princess's personal belongings. Don't break them. Princess, let me help you onto the carriage. Be careful. Your body hasn't fully recovered yet. Be careful of your wounds. As soon as Jolin walked out of the door, he saw Qing Luo and the other maidservants yelling and shouting at some of the servants to move some things into the carriage. Jolin was leading a snow-white foal. He mounted the horse and patted it lightly. The foal suddenly galloped a few steps and spread its forewings. Amidst the exclamations of the crowd, it flew a few steps into the air. Jolin opened his mouth and yawned. He lay on the horse's back and reached out to gently rub the foal's ears. Aya, don't be naughty. There are too many people here. Get down. The foal folded its wings, which were tens of meters long, and reverted to the appearance of an ordinary horse. It shook its head and trotted off. Qing Luo's eyes widened in shock. She turned to look at Princess Huaizhu, whose expression was extremely ugly. She whispered, Princess Huaizhu, what is that? A mystical beast? They had lived in the lower star regions for so long, but they had never seen such a rare flying mystical horse. Their eyes widened, as if they had just seen a wondrous object. Princess Huaizhu's face burned. She glared at Qing Luo and the other maidservants. Put away the curiosity in your eyes. You good-for-nothings. It's just a small matter. Look at how scared you are. However, the envy and jealousy in her eyes were difficult to conceal. She thought to herself, where did this wild girl come from? How could she have such a mystical horse? Even as a princess, she had never owned such a mystical beast. To think that it could fly with 4 wings. Chapter 5762. Princess Huaizhu fiercely pulled back her gaze and slammed down the bead curtain. She sat back down in the carriage, feeling as if something was blocking her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. Qing Luo obediently knelt beside her and cautiously glanced at Princess Huaizhu's expression. She whispered, Princess, it seems that this Miss Qiao's identity is not simple. We know very little about Northern Mo's royal family. How about I send someone to inquire about that Miss Qiao's background? Huaizhu couldn't resist sneering. No need. What's there to investigate? Don't tell me you really believed her words. The passageway between the upper 3 provinces and the lower star domain has long been sealed. Unless one ascends the heavenly stairway to the 6 prefectures' continents, how can one freely enter and exit? Qing Luo thought for a moment before whispering. Could it be that the other party has some powerful mystic artifact that allows them to freely travel between the 3 provinces, 6 prefectures, and the lower star domain? Princess Huaizhu glared at her in annoyance. Impossible. You've cultivated for so long. But have you ever heard of such an extraordinary person? I haven't. But seeing how powerful that lass's mount is, it doesn't seem likely that she's faking it. Qing Luo softly reminded. Actually, it won't take much time to find a few people to inquire among the people. Princess, only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. Princess Huaizhu thought about it and felt that this made sense. Thus, she nodded. Then go do it. Remember not to let anyone else know. She didn't want others to know that she, the Grand Princess of the Horde Kingdom, was actually afraid of a little girl with no background. She didn't agree to Qing Luo's request to investigate that lass's background because she was flustered and uncertain. Huaizhu squeezed the handkerchief in her hand and had Qing Luo come closer to whisper, Then should we tell Chunyin about the plan and postpone it? That's fine. Qing Luo nodded. To be safe, let's investigate thoroughly first. Although Princess Huaizhu was a bit unhappy, Xiao Lin's move just now was truly shocking and had a relatively large psychological impact on her. Qing Luo, this lass, was meticulous and had always been the one to advise her on many matters. Huaizhu trusted her completely and felt that there was nothing wrong with listening to Qing Luo's advice on this matter. Arbor's group stayed in Quoto village for several days before deciding to set off for Shijiu City. There was even a small episode yesterday. Li Xinyu, who had been rescued by them earlier, had returned. When she saw Arbor, she kept shouting for help. At that time, many villagers of Li's village chased after her. When Li Xinyu saw Arbor and the others, she knelt down in front of them and cried for help. She said that the villagers of the Li's village disregarded her wishes and forced her to marry the idiot at the head of the village. No matter what, Li Xinyu was not willing to marry that fool. She ran all the way back to Arbor to make the decision for her. Arbor thought it was funny. They had only met by chance, and he was just saving her in passing. Why did he create so much trouble for himself? She looked at the villagers of Li's village who were eyeing her covetously and curled her lips speechlessly. For a moment, the villagers of Li's village did not dare to rush up and cause trouble. After all, in their eyes, the young men and women in front of them were like gods descending from the heavens. Their appearances were refined and their temperaments were excellent. They did not look like people from their village at all. In their minds, the furthest they could think of was guessing which major city Qiao Mu and the others were from. Before they figured out their identities, the villagers of Li's village naturally would not easily offend Arbor and the others. The village chief of Li's village came forward to talk to Arbor and the others. To be honest, Arbor did not want to care about this matter at all, especially when it involved that troublemaker Li Xinyu. Troublesome. Arbor already knew what kind of person Li Xinyu was, so naturally, he did not want to poke his nose in her business. Thus, he said to the village chief, "We are not familiar with this lady. It is not convenient for outsiders like us to interfere in your village's matters. You can handle it yourselves." At that time, the village chief was stunned. In his eyes, this little noble in front of him was simply too knowledgeable and considerate. He hurriedly and humbly curtsied and agreed. Li Xinyu could not take it anymore. She screamed, crawled, and threw a tantrum in front of everyone, insisting that Arbor make the decision to save them. How could Arbor have a good temper? He directly led his people into the house. After the zombie tide was more or less resolved, they had found people to renovate and guard the house they previously left in Quoto village. The Qiao family members habitually went to a place to buy land and houses, although these properties and fields in the lower star domain were not of much use now, and most of them were given to loyal old servants to live in. But due to her obsession with these properties, cough cough, since it was rare for her to come back, the little stoic would still urge her younger sister to visit her family's properties on the way back to the capital. Just take a few melons and dates, if you can. Li Xinyu was horrified. She didn't expect Madame Mo's personality to be so eccentric. She really did not care about her when she said she would. Now, she was waiting for these big shots to save her life. They only needed to move their fingers slightly, and these villagers of Li's village would kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. It was clearly a trivial matter, but no one was willing to help her, Li Xinyu. Li Xinyu was furious and yelled and screamed outside the house. In the end, she was gagged by her villagers and dragged all the way back. Before long, the old folks guarding the Qiao residence went outside to inquire about the news and came back to tell Arbor that Li Xinyu took the 500 mystic currency betrothal money from the village's idiot family and ran away in the middle of the night after pocketing it. This time, they finally caught her with great difficulty, and the village chief ordered her to be married off. She had to get married whether she wanted to or not. After hearing about Li Xinyu's escape from marriage, An Wushuang looked like she was looking at a weirdo and glanced outside the door. If she didn't want to get married, why did she accept the betrothal money? She didn't want to get married just because she took the money? She even described the other party as a bastard who forced her into marriage. She was clearly the one who was greedy and swindled money out of marriage. This was truly amazing. Third Foon nodded and said, "Thankfully, we didn't care about our lousy affairs. Otherwise, we'd be looking for trouble again." Arbor expressionlessly turned to look at the shocked Xiao Sr. "Do you understand?" Xiao Sun nodded fiercely. "Sister, you're right. Meddling in other people's business won't end well." Xiao Sun looked up at the sky and recited, "I swear to the heavens that I will put away my saintly heart. From now on, I won't meddle in other people's business and won't mention idle thoughts." Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. The little Stoics' education method had always been rather eccentric. Everyone packed their things and set out for Shijiu City. With their current strength, they could arrive in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. However, everyone came here to play, so they naturally walked and stopped to look around. They only arrived at Shijiu City's entrance when it was almost evening. Chapter 5763. At that time, the setting sun was shining in front of Shijiu City's city gate. Under the lofty city walls, two newly repaired city gates towered in the setting sun. Arbor's group arrived in a carriage. Just as they approached the city gate, they heard the clamorous sounds of gongs and drums. The citizens lining the streets held two long welcome banners and kept shouting, "Welcome! Welcome! Welcome the arrival of the divine province's emperor and empress." For a moment, Arbor thought he had misheard. He glanced at Lien, who was sitting next to him, in astonishment. Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "It wasn't me. I've been with you these past few days, so how could I have gotten in touch with Shijiu City's people?" Arbor thought that was true. Then was that last Xiaolin who did it. If Xiaolin knew that her sister treated her like this, she would definitely cry injustice. She merely revealed to City Lord Gu that her sister and company would be arriving in a few days. Her original intention was to let City Lord Gu prepare and get close to her sister or something. After all, City Lord Gu was quite a nice person. She even specially instructed City Lord Gu to only receive them slightly. Who knew that City Lord Gu would make such a big fuss? Arbor hastily lowered the carriage's curtain and covered his face with one hand, pretending not to see those brothers holding banners outside. The carriage arrived at Shijiu City's city gate for a routine inspection. A soldier standing outside the carriage announced loudly, "You need to test your mystic strength to enter the city. If you want to stay for a long time, you need to scan your inner world and pay a portion of your supplies." Arbor's memories were instantly pulled far away. It was as if he had returned to that evening when he dragged his entire family to Shijiu City's city gate. Like now, they had to test their mystic strength and pay their supplies to enter the city. However, there were many people fleeing back then, and there was a long line at the city gate. Unlike now, when order had basically been restored, there weren't many people fleeing here. Duan Yu couldn't resist laughing. "Jojo, you even cheated me out of 500 mystic currency here, remember?" Arbor expressionlessly glanced at him. Lien's ears immediately perked up. He glanced at Duan Yu and nudged closer to his wife. "What's going on? Tell me. Why didn't you say that you were hanging out with a bunch of idiots from Daybreak Sect back then?" Arbor snorted and turned to complain to her husband. "At that time, the people from the Daybreak Sect even bullied me. There's a guy called Jia Mingren who even made my father crawl under him." Duan Yu's mouth twitched. "In the end, didn't you kick me until I fainted? I even had to compensate you with 500 mystic currency. The most shameful thing was that Shang Kuan and Jia Mingren didn't pay back the ransom fees. They were truly a pair of paupers." Lien came back to her senses at once, and she turned to glare at Duan Yu. "I remember now. Your Daybreak Sect actually bullied my Jojo. Didn't you say 500 cultivation coins plus a kiss back then? I want to redeem the people of your Daystroke Sect." Duan Yu, Arbor, Yuan Shurchin laughed heartily. "There is actually such an interesting thing?" Duan Yu grumpily retorted. She was only 7 or 8 years old at the time. "What's wrong with kissing? It's not like kissing isn't allowed." "Stingy." Lien pounced over, wanting to beat him up, but Arbor hastily pulled her back. Arbor lifted the carriage's curtain with a whoosh and shouted at the soldiers outside. Hey, test. Fuck, these two were so annoying. They were so friendly to outsiders that they could wear the same pair of pants, but normally, they were always dog-eat-dog, so annoying. How could Mo Yin know the details of this incident in Shijio City? It must be that scoundrel, Aoyi, who sent him a message. Arbor could only come up with this after racking his brains, so he shouted outside, "Toti." There was no reply from Aoyi. Just as His Majesty betrayed him, this guy had already run far away to hide in a tree. Puffed. And Wu Shuang couldn't resist laughing. All right. I just saw him run far away. Let's enter the city first. Welcome. The voices on the street abruptly stopped. Everyone stared at the handsome men and beautiful women in front of them, as if they were immortals flying from outer space, and their gazes were somewhat dazed. Then, the leading sister-in-law hurriedly left the group and jogged all the way to Arbor's group. With a plop, she knelt on the ground. You must be guests from China. With her looks, demeanor, and appearance, there was no need to guess. After all, they had never seen such a group of good-looking people in a small city like this. And Wu Shuang's mouth twitched, and she hurriedly reached out to help her up. Hey, get up first. Get up and talk. The sister-in-law shook her head repeatedly and then waved her hand twice in command. The passers-by on both sides seemed to have suddenly reacted, and the sound of gongs and drums resounded in the sky as they shouted, "Welcome! Arbor, she really didn't want to bother with these fools. Quickly report to the city lord that the guests from China have arrived. After the sister-in-law shouted, several soldiers immediately reacted and hurriedly mounted their horses, galloping to find the city lord at lightning speed. When the city guard standing at the side saw such a large group of people, he couldn't help but ask, Do we still need to test them? Test my ass. The sister-in-law went up and slapped the back of the fool's head. Hurry up and welcome the guests in. At this moment, Arbor was in a mess in the wind. The 7 flowers in the star domain were chattering noisily. Jojo, we're coming out. It looks so lively here. It's so fun. I want to go out and take a look. Sir Jojo's head hurt from all the noise, and he waved his hand to let them out. The sister-in-law, who was enthusiastically exchanging greetings with them, was instantly startled. In the blink of an eye, 7 or 8 more people appeared from the original group, and this really made them dumbfounded. The crowd on both sides of the street exclaimed in unison, Immortals! They're immortals! Gu Qingfeng hurriedly rode over with Mr. Zhang. When he saw Mo Yin and Arbor standing at the front of the crowd, his eyes immediately widened. The two of them hastily jumped off their horses and rushed over. They were so excited that they almost made a mistake in their greetings. They prostrated themselves on the ground and almost shouted, "This official greets His Highness the Crown Prince." However, they hastily corrected themselves. This subordinate greets His Majesty and Her Majesty. Arbor looked at the two people in front of him and sighed with emotion. She had a very good impression of City Lord Gu and Mr. Zhang. When their family lived in Shijio City, City Lord Gu and Mr. Zhang took great care of them. The Qiao estate in Pear Blossom Alley was remodeled from the City Lord's estate's private garden. It was secluded and quiet, and no one usually dared to disturb them. City Lord Gu, Mr. Zhang, long time no see. Gu Qingfeng and Zhang Yin excitedly went up to greet them, their eyes almost red. They still clearly remembered the scene when Miss Qiao's family came to Shijio City that evening. It had been almost 13 years since Miss Qiao left for the Holy Water sect. Chapter 5764. Gu Qingfeng and Zhang Yin were very happy to reunite with their old friends. They didn't expect that they would have the opportunity to meet them again in their lifetime. The two of them welcomed everyone to the City Lord's mansion and warmly greeted them with a banquet. On the other side, the Great King's backyard was on fire. First, the little eunuch who followed the Great King's order to reprimand the crown prince cried for his father and mother to return to the palace. He repeated the crown prince's words word for word to the Great King. Then, something happened to the Great King's new favorite, Imperial Concubine Li. A group of men in black rushed to Imperial Concubine Li's bedroom and dragged her out. Although the Great King sent many guards to protect Imperial concubine Li. Imperial concubine Li was still dragged out of her bedroom. After a series of rescues, Imperial concubine Li's life was not in danger, but she was beaten up by a group of people. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind this. The great king was so angry that he rushed to the brilliant Sun Hall in the middle of the palace. He originally wanted to reprimand Empress Zhao. He didn't expect to run into his own mother. He failed to reprimand the queen and was kicked out by the Empress Dowager as a result. This joke spread overnight. The great king was so angry that he didn't go to court for 3 days. On the 4th day, when Empress Dowager Meng's carriage arrived at the entrance of the great king's palace, the old great king was so scared that he sneaked out from the back door and obediently went to court. Imperial concubine Li's beating was in vain. It was said that Imperial concubine Li was so angry that she lay in her own pearl flower palace for 7 days and couldn't get up. She had to simmer it with pigeon soup 3 times a day to make up for it. After that, Empress Zhao found an excuse to send people to the Pearl Flower Palace to reprimand Imperial concubine Li again and cut off half a year's monthly allowance. At this point, the old great king stopped. He didn't dare to argue with the queen and could only secretly use his private money to help Imperial concubine Li. When these miscellaneous matters were gathered into information and passed MOU, a certain someone only glanced at it indifferently before tossing it aside and not asking about it. On the other hand, Jolin treated these gossips as stories. When he was happy, he would laugh out loud and slap his thigh. The great king was still as cowardly as ever. Say, if your mother is so powerful, why doesn't she drive out all those orioles and swallows from the harem? Xiao Lin asked in puzzlement. MOU looked up at the sky and thought for a moment before saying, maybe it's because my father is pitiful. As the great king of Northern Mo, this fellow usually didn't have any great hobbies other than this little hobby of liking beauties. His mother pitied him and didn't want to kill off this hobby of his. The way they interact is really strange. The relationship between the great king and the queen wasn't good, right? How could he not have feelings for her after being together for so many years? If they really encountered any danger, the first person the great king would think of was still Empress Zhao. The relationship between the great king and the queen was harmonious, but they quarreled every other day. The great king would occasionally be angered by Empress Zhao until his blood boiled. Let's not be like them. It's really not good to interact like this. MOU reached out to push the little girl's forehead. Xiao Lin nodded. Then, she came to her senses and stared at her with round eyes. MHM, we have to interact like big brother and sister-in-law. That's the normal way. MOU casually took a cup of tea and stuffed it into her hand. Take a nap after drinking the tea. Xiao Lin couldn't help but be amused by this fellow. Who wants to interact with you? Interact with your sister. Speaking of which, we've been walking for 2 days already, but we really haven't seen any zombies. Also, that Spectre village you mentioned, is it still ahead? Aren't you going to take a detour to patrol? According to the patrol map you gave us, we'll have to take a detour for at least 10 days to half a month. MOU tilted her head and winked at her with a chuckle. Say, what's with sister-in-law's love for money? She's been away for so many years. Why does she have to patrol all the properties when she comes back this time? These properties couldn't be moved to China. Could it be that she wanted to stay and deal with them if she found something wrong with them after the patrol? Xiao Lin glared at MOU. Even if she's been away for hundreds of years, what's my sister's is my sister's. My sister can give it away if she doesn't want it, but others can't snatch it away. I have to interrogate people on behalf of my sister and see if there's anyone who's secretly disobeying her behind her back. When she entrusted these properties to people to look after, she found some honest people. After so many years, she didn't know if any of them had changed. The main reason why Arbor sent his sister to patrol was to let her observe people's hearts. This was also a complicated life experience. At this time, Xiao Lin still couldn't understand her sister's meaning. Arbor had put in a lot of effort for this pair of siblings. Oh, MOU nodded. Compared to the simple-minded Xiao Lin, this fellow thought more. She could roughly guess her sister-in-law's meaning after thinking about it for a while. It seemed that her sister-in-law felt that Xiao was still too simple-minded after all these years. Knock, knock, knock. Someone gently knocked on the window of their carriage. Xiao lifted the curtain to take a look and saw a submissive and beautiful woman walking quickly beside the carriage. She said in a small voice, "Your Highness, the wound on my princess' back has split open again. Please stop for a moment and let the imperial physician treat her wound." Xiao turned to look at Mou, who was sitting on the side. The latter raised her eyebrows slightly and nodded lightly. Xiao looked out of the window curiously and saw a female physician bow slightly and follow the maidservant named Qing Luo into Princess Huaiju's carriage. "What's she doing?" Xiao looked like a curious baby. "I think she's trying to trick you." A trace of amusement floated on Mou's lips. "Oh, in your opinion, what is she trying to trick me about? I reckon that maidservant of hers will come looking for you again in a while." Xiao eyes turned as she said with a grin. Sure enough, a moment later, Qing Luo ran back tearfully and knelt outside Mou's carriage. She sobbed softly. "Your Highness, the princess's injury is very serious. That physician Liang said that without a black grade or above hemostatic ointment, the princess's back injury will continue to spread. What do you want me to do by telling me this?" Mou sat in the carriage and didn't even show his face. Only his indifferent voice traveled out. The girl called Qing Luo couldn't help but tremble slightly. "Am I a physician? Do you think I can treat her just because you told me?" Mou's voice grew colder. "Since you can't treat Princess Huaiju, drag that physician Liang away and deal with her." Qing Luo's body trembled. Physician Liang, who was originally standing at the side and watching the show, suddenly trembled in fright and knelt on the ground with a plop. When Xiao saw this scene, he almost laughed out loud. He hurriedly covered his mouth with his two small hands and coughed lightly. He stretched out his leg and lightly kicked Mou beside him. Chapter 5765. Can it be cured? Ink Jade pursed her lips and asked in annoyance. "It can be cured, it can be cured. It can be cured." Physician Liang nodded repeatedly. She immediately got up from the ground and rolled back into Princess Huaiju's carriage. Jolin was amused. Ink Jade lowered the curtain and said coldly to Qing Luo, "Don't bother me if there's nothing important. Even if there's something important, don't bother me." Qing Luo hung her head dejectedly and climbed back into Princess Huaiju's carriage. She exchanged glances with the princess, who was lying on the cushion. Although the master and servant didn't say anything, the exchange of glances was obvious. His Highness the Crown Prince is stubborn. I don't know what to do. Let's think of something else later. Princess Huaiju calmed down. It seemed that her constant attempts to get close to His Highness had made him very unhappy. But when she thought about how she, a noble princess, had been rejected time and time again, she couldn't help but feel angry. After Physician Liang gingerly finished examining Princess Huaiju's illness, she left. The princess hurriedly gave her personal servant, Qing Luo, a look. "Go send a message to Chunyan." Princess Huaiju stuffed a slip of paper into Qing Luo's hand and gestured with her lips. "I thought of another way to test that Miss Qiao." "Yes." Qing Luo looked down at the slip of paper and nodded with a smile. "Princess, don't worry and recuperate. This servant will talk to Chunyan." Princess Huaiju gently pressed down on her back, and a sharp pain immediately came over her. She gritted her teeth and slowly lay down with one hand on her waist. "Don't disturb me if there's nothing important. Let me sleep a little longer." "Yes, princess." Qing Luo climbed out of the carriage and quietly went to find Chunyan. Their every move fell into the eyes of Ink Jade's secret guard, Steam Bun. Steam Bun sent a message not long after. Ink Jade glanced at it and didn't say much. She only gave an indifferent order to continue on their journey. Jolin was about to fall asleep in the carriage. The bumpy ride lasted until 10 in the evening. The carriage stopped at the entrance of Small Town. The wheels rolled over a wooden stick and jolted heavily. Jolin's large head shook violently, waking her up. Mou found her interesting and couldn't help but smile. You're awake? Oh, where are we now? According to the map of your assets, we should have reached Pingyang Town by now. Mou held the map of the Chow family's assets and glanced at it with interest. His slender finger pointed at one of the red dots. It's here. According to the records, there is a manor here with 100 mu of land. Why do you think sister-in-law would buy property in such a small town? What do you know? Jolin glanced at the man in annoyance. My sister is an ambitious person. Buying property all over the country is her ambition and goal. What do you men know? Mou is speechless. Actually, she just likes to amass wealth everywhere. Mou thought to himself. Maybe he saw something good on the way and bought it. This was probably his hobby. That manor is in the easternmost part of town. Should we go there now? Jolin nodded. Let's go. While they were talking, they suddenly heard a loud noise coming from behind the carriage. Accompanied by ear-piercing shouts and commotion, the noise quickly spread towards them. Mou lifted the carriage curtain with one hand, only to see secret guard Steamed Bun standing outside the window, expressionlessly. Seeing him poke his head out, Steamed Bun said indifferently, Someone touched Miss Chow's divine beast. They're now being chased by the divine beast. Jolin blinked her large eyes and jumped out of the carriage. Looking up, she saw her little Pegasus spreading out 4 wings that were tens of meters long, flipping in the air. It opened its mouth and spat out a flame that was several meters long, chasing after someone below. Wah! The large crowd below broke out in cold sweat, rolling and crawling in all directions to dodge. Jolin jumped in fright and hurriedly leaped into the air. With a whoosh, she arrived beside the little Pegasus. Don't make a scene. This 4-winged snow foal was, in essence, a sacred beast that was infinitely close to a sacred beast. If it were to get angry in the lower star domain, a mouthful of flames could kill thousands of people. Jolin broke out in cold sweat and hurriedly raised her hand to calm the little Pegasus' head. What are you doing? Don't make a scene. The 4-winged snow foal shook its head and rubbed against Jolin, the words, I'm in a bad mood, written all over its face. Jolin hurriedly circled around it. Seeing that it was safe and sound, she couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Then she wondered if she was too nervous. Where was this place? This was Seekong Planet, not the Divine Continent. How could there be something that could hurt her divine beast? It was just that her Snowy had always been very obedient. Why was it so angry now? Jolin made it fold its wings and hopped down from the horse's back. She then flipped down from the horse's back and raised her hand to stroke the snowy white fur on its neck. Turning around, she saw Mou slowly walking over from outside the crowd. Jolin said to him, What's going on? Who is it that touched my Snowy just now? If someone hadn't touched it, based on Jolin's understanding of this little Pegasus, it wouldn't have gotten so angry so easily. Mou raised his eyebrows and turned to look at the hidden guard following behind him. Steamed Bun waved his hand, and 2 guards escorted a dark, thin, and short man. They pushed him in front of Jolin and directly kicked his knee. With a thud, that person knelt heavily on the ground, his entire body trembling like a sieve. Jolin glanced at that person and found that he was very unfamiliar. She didn't recognize him at all. Who is this? Vice Captain Chun. Aren't you going to explain to us? Mou smiled faintly and turned to glance at Chun Yin, who was standing there ramrod straight and unmoving. Chun Yin, His Highness is calling for you. The 2 guards shouted angrily. With a cold face, Chun Yin strode to Mou and knelt on one knee as he sincerely said, This subordinate doesn't understand what His Highness means. Oh, see if this person is one of your people? You don't understand? Mou looked at him in amusement. Why would your people touch Miss Chiao's steed? When we were resting just now, this person wanted to feed Miss Chiao's horse. I don't know how, but he angered the horse. Chun Yin coldly glanced at that person, then took 2 steps forward and slapped him across the face. What's going on? Who told you to touch Miss Chiao's steed? That person gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. Even when he was slapped, he only lowered his head and didn't say a word. Chun Yin, Mou coldly called his name. Are you still not going to confess? Vice Captain Chun wanted to steal the horse, right? What did you have someone add to the horse's feed? Chapter 5766. Chen Yan's eyes flashed. Miss Chiao, you misunderstand. Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, we just need to have the medical officer examine it. Xiao Lin didn't want to waste time with him and turned to glance at Black Jade. The latter nodded slightly and was about to turn to speak when a short, dark-skinned man who had been caught spat at the crowd and struggled to his feet, cursing angrily. It's just a lousy horse. Why would this elder want to steal it? Your dog eyes must be blind, Al. Before he could finish speaking, Steam Bun punched him to the ground. Black Jade's cold eyes swept over him. Make him speak the truth. Yes. Steam Bun pulled the man up and dragged him out of the crowd like a rag. This action was so large that it gave everyone a fright. Princess Huaizhu, who was standing nearby, subconsciously clenched her fists and anxiously turned to look at her servant girl. Qing Luo whispered, Princess, don't worry. The people we sent are very tight-lipped. They definitely won't speak carelessly. Idiot. Princess Huaizhu cursed in a low voice. She simply entered her carriage and didn't come out again. Not long after, Steamed Bun ran to the princess' carriage to pass on a message that His Highness had invited her. Princess Huaizhu, who was already ill at ease, felt her heart inexplicably thump. She gave Qing Luo a meaningful glance. Qing Luo hurriedly stepped forward and said coldly, Guard bow. Does His Highness need something? Princess, you know very well what you've done. Why ask when you already know the answer? Steamed Bun gave a fake smile and bared his teeth at the master and servant pair. Princess Huaizhu felt her heart clench. What do you mean? Before Huaizhu could speak, Qing Luo had already shouted at the top of his lungs. You Northern Mo people wouldn't suspect that our princess wanted to steal Miss Chiao's precious horse, right? Qing Luo sneered. Is she worthy? Princess, there's no need to deny it. Your subordinate has already confessed the truth. He even gave that taming talisman to His Highness. Princess Huaizhu's expression changed, and she nervously turned to look at Qing Luo. The meaning in her gaze was very clear. Didn't you just say that the people you sent over are all stubborn and won't be recruited? It hadn't even been 5 minutes, but she had already revealed everything. She had even given the precious taming talisman to the crown prince. Huaizhu felt that her heart and lungs were about to explode from anger. She reached out and tightly grasped the hem of her clothes. She raised her chin and tried her best to maintain a noble demeanor. Lead the way. Qing Luo was also startled. He hurriedly got off the carriage and nervously followed Princess Huaizhu all the way to the open space by the riverside. Mou decided to camp here for the night and settle the dispute at hand before continuing on his journey. He felt that he had to make things clear to this foolish princess. He hoped that in the future, she would not come up with this kind of joke again. He actually used a talisman in front of Miss Chiao, and it was even that kind of lousy taming talisman. He had never heard of such a talisman in the world. Earlier, he had asked Jolin, and Jolin had clearly told him that the princess had been deceived. There was not the slightest bit of talisman energy flowing on that so-called taming talisman. Therefore, that taming talisman was a fake talisman. The princess of the Horde country was the well-educated and well-mannered woman that Lord Father had described. Why did it seem like she was completely different? Could a normal person use a talisman in front of Miss Chiao? Although this second Miss Chiao did not know how to draw talismans, it went without saying how many precious talismans she had on her. Her elder sister was a truly omnipotent saint-level great talisman master. Saint-level golden talismans could be drawn with bare hands without any effort. To actually show off in front of second Miss Chiao and use a fake talisman to trick her, wasn't this a joke? Huaizhu walked through the crowd, followed by a somewhat nervous Qing Luo. The master and servant pair's movements were somewhat restrained as they walked to Mou. At that moment, a gentle breeze was blowing by the riverside, swaying the thin weeping willows. That outstanding young man and woman were sitting by a small fire, fiddling with the food on the grill. When Huaizhu and Qing Luo walked over, Jolin only turned a glance at them, then continued to stare at the food. Mo Yu waved his hand, indicating for steamed bun to escort over the dark-skinned youth who had confessed. That person was covered in blood, which was rather out of place in this tranquil, jade-green water. Qing Luo shrieked in fright, but when Huaizhu glared at him, he hastily covered his mouth, not daring to make the slightest sound. Mo Yu turned to sweep a glance at the master and servant pair. Does Princess have any explanation? This person confessed that it was you who ordered him to do it. This taming talisman was also given to him by your maidservant. As he spoke, Mo Yu tossed the crumpled yellow talisman in his hand in front of Princess Huaizhu, a trace of incomprehension in his eyes. This woman was truly foolish and naive. This taming talisman might have been given to her by some swindler, but she actually believed it to be true. Everyone knew that mystic cultivators above level 10 could form contracts with mystic beasts by chance. It was not possible for a random talisman to tame a beast. No, it's not like that. Your Highness, don't listen to his nonsense. Our princess doesn't know him at all. Qing Luo gritted his teeth in anger, his gaze darting back and forth as if searching for someone. Looking for Chun Yan? This prince had him tied up. Mo Yu curled his lips. This person's management was lax, and a notorious thief appeared among his subordinates. As the deputy captain, he should also take responsibility. From today onwards, remove Chun Yan from his position as the deputy captain. In the future, he is not allowed to interfere in any of the Dragon Saliva Guard's matters. Mo Yu coldly ordered. Yes, Princess Huaizhu's heart thumped again, and she inwardly cursed. This Chun Yan was one of her aunt's trusted aides. Her aunt had expended a great deal of effort to arrange for this person to be the deputy captain of the Dragon Saliva Guard. But now His Highness the Crown Prince had dismissed him with a single sentence. This truly made one feel extremely powerless. In the face of absolute power, anything one did would be courting death. Mo Yu swept a glance at the pale-faced Princess Huaizhu, and a faint trace of disgust flitted through his eyes. I'll give you a word of advice. There's still about 20 days of travel. Don't create such a mess again. This prince's patience is limited. Limited? You simply don't have patience. Or should I say, you truly don't have the slightest bit of patience with this princess. Princess Huaizhu's eyes shot out flames of fury. She was about to open her mouth to retort when an arrow unexpectedly flew through the air and landed beside her feet with a whoosh. She was so shocked that cold sweat broke out all over her body, and she fell on her, but Chapter 5767. At the same time, dozens of gray-clothed assassins suddenly surrounded the carriage. Every one of them held a longbow in their hands and fired iron arrows at the group. Their speed was so fast that the group was caught off guard. Two ordinary guards fell to the ground after being hit by the arrows. The leader shouted at the top of his lungs, "Capture him alive." With a raise of his hand, countless arrows were aimed at Black Jade's carriage. Jolin turned her head and looked at Black Jade in dismay. The little girl hinted at Black Jade with her eyes. "Did you summon these enemies?" Black Jade hurriedly shook his head and shrugged helplessly. Looking at these people's attire, they should be assassins sent by the Kingdom of Strength. Steamed Bun jumped in front of the two and swept his sword, easily deflecting the dozen arrows. "Your Highness, this subordinate will stall them here. Please take Miss Qiao and leave." Black Jade and Jolin's mouths twitched at the same time as they silently looked at each other. They didn't think that the Crown Prince's personal hidden guard would be so good at acting. Looking at this drama queen, it was truly comical. Jolin rolled her eyes at the sky. It didn't take long for MOU's guards to outflank the enemy and beat them back. The funny thing was that Steam Bun was still jumping around in front of them, waving his longsword while looking around with bright eyes. He couldn't wait for a few more arrows to come out for him to block. But after waiting for a long time, not a single arrow came out. This person awkwardly turned his head to look at the expressionless Crown Prince. Steamed Bun lightly coughed and said in a small voice, "Your Highness, this place isn't safe. You should take Miss Chow and leave first." Jolin rolled her eyes at him and hopped off the carriage. Steamed Bun hurriedly took 2 steps forward and used his arm to block Jolin's path. "Second Miss, be careful." Black Jade couldn't help but cover his face. He now had reason to suspect that when he trained the hidden guards, he placed too much emphasis on loyalty and neglected the most important point: IQ. Jolin expressionlessly looked at Steamed Bun and silently walked around him. She lifted her feet and walked towards the 2 guards on the ground. These 2 men were ordinary guards. They didn't have time to guard against the arrows at the beginning. They were the first to be hit by the arrows and fell to the ground. The injuries on their waists were more serious. Jolin squatted beside the 2 of them and skillfully stopped their bleeding before applying medicine on them. Bodyguard Steamed Bun stared blankly at Second Miss Xiao's smooth movements. He laughed foolishly and said, "Second Miss is a doctor, not a doctor." Jolin shook his head. She was a dabbler in medicine, so she naturally knew how to deal with simple external injuries. As for those complicated internal injuries or poisons, it could only be said to be half-baked medical knowledge. Steamed Bun watched as she stopped the 2 guards bleeding with a flip of her hand. After giving them the medicine, their complexions gradually improved, and they felt very impressed. Seeing how humble Xiao Lin was, his good impression of her naturally increased. He thought to himself, "No wonder His Highness looks at Second Miss Xiao like a bedbug looking at honey." It turns out that Second Miss Xiao is beautiful, kind, and skilled. She has so many good points. If His Highness knew that this fellow was slandering him in his heart, he wouldn't think anything of it. After Jolin finished treating the 2's injuries, she had everyone carry them away to recuperate. Looking over, she saw the leader of the gray-clothed men from the Li Nation raise his hand and shout, "Pull back!" MOU. This group of problematic assassins from the Li Nation really weren't professional enough. They looked like they were here to be funny, and they even said some nondescript Jianghu jargon before leaving. These people are the hidden guards arranged by the Li Nation's imperial family? Second Miss Xiao asked in astonishment. They really didn't look like much. They shouldn't be. MOU shook her head helplessly. They look like they came to scout ahead of time. Scout ahead? But didn't they already scout ahead when we were outside Shijiu City? According to MOU, the small group of people who attacked Princess Huaizhu outside Shijiu City were also sent by the Li Nation to stop the princess from entering the city. It looked like they were rather stubborn towards this Princess Huaizhu. Why must the Li Nation's people stop this Princess Huaizhu from entering the Mo Kingdom capital? Bodyguard Steamed Bun explained with a smile. Second Miss, this subordinate is clear about this. The Li Nation is located on our country's northwestern border. In recent years, the nation's power has been growing stronger by the day. And the Lang Nation originally belonged to their jurisdiction, so we have to pay tribute to them every year. Although the zombie disaster has been improving in recent years, the growth of crops and the like is still very slow. Bodyguard Steamed Bun explained unceasingly. This Lang Nation was originally a small nation. After being oppressed by the Li Nation these past 2 years, its vitality has been greatly damaged, and the entire nation is in a state of not being able to eat their fill. Now that the Lang Nation suddenly wants to jump out of the Li Nation sphere of control, the Li Nation naturally isn't willing. When they heard that the Lang Nation intends to send their princess to our northern MO for a marriage alliance, they impatiently mobilized their troops and impatiently tried to sabotage this marriage alliance time and time again. Second Miss Xiao gave an O. She peeked at MOU before turning to leave with a humph. Liar, still saying it wasn't a marriage alliance. Then they were here for a marriage alliance. MOU knitted her brows and glared at the talkative bodyguard Steamed Bun, saying in a chilly voice, "I see that you've been living comfortably these days. Your face has even grown round. When you return to the capital tomorrow, you should go to Marshall Mountain and report yourself. You should train hard." Bodyguard Steamed Bun. What did I do? His Highness is suddenly angry. Is His Highness's intermittent mental illness acting up again? Is that right? Is that right? Seeing Mo float away from him, bodyguard Steamed Bun bitterly hung his head and turned to roar the bodyguard behind him. What are you all still standing there for? Pursue. I want to see him, dead or alive. He was infuriated to death. It was all these Nation people's fault for finding trouble with His Highness all day long. Now His Highness was venting all of his unhappiness on him. Who did he offend this time? He had to exterminate these rascals from the Nation and teach them a lesson. Your Highness, Princess Huaizhu, fainted from fright. Mou, who had been given the cold shoulder outside the carriage, was currently vexed. She turned around and heard Physician Liang speaking to her with trepidation. She grumpily scolded. Am I the physician or are you the physician? If you have to report every trivial matter, what's the use of being a physician? If you can't handle it well, then scram as soon as possible. Stop being so long-winded. The pitiful Physician Liang had only made a single report, but she was rebuked by His Highness in a fit of rage. She immediately covered her head and fled like a rat, trembling in fear and not daring to say anything else. Mou still wanted to board the carriage, but she saw a pillow being thrown out from inside. Shaolin or huffed, she's asleep. Chapter 5768. Mou couldn't help but be amused. She said in a low, muffled voice from outside, You can still talk to me when you're asleep. Shaolin, but didn't say anything. Then, she heard the window beside her move. A figure rolled in from outside the window and nimbly rolled to her side. Shaolin stomped her leg and kicked him. Mou hurriedly dodged, one hand blocking in front of her face and the other grabbing the left leg that kicked over. She cried out, Damn girl, are you trying to kill me? You don't learn the good things, but you're learning my sister-in-law's bad habits. Shaolin retracted her leg and sat up cross-legged in a huff. Try saying that again. What did I say? My sister-in-law is beautiful and generous. She's the best person in the world. Damn girl. She wanted to record his words into the voice transmission Jade Talisman so that she could viciously complain about him in front of her sister-in-law. Jolin looked at this guy with a curious expression. It had to be said that this guy was rather vigilant and had a way with words and actions. She was just thinking of secretly tricking this guy to say something bad about her sister so that she could give the voice transmission Jade Talisman to her sister. She didn't expect that this guy wouldn't fall for it. What a slippery guy. Jolin harumphed and turned to look out the window. I'll sleep in the carriage today. You can scram now. Why were you angry just now? Who's angry? Jolin turned to glare at him angrily. She was actually rather puzzled in her heart. Just now, when she heard bodyguard Steam Bun say that, she felt inexplicably uncomfortable in her heart. It was as if the word marriage alliance was particularly grating on her ears. Mou inched closer to her and stealthily pressed Jolin's small hand with her paws that had nowhere to put them. Actually, Steam Bun's words can't be taken seriously at all. Think about what kind of person I am. Am I the kind of person to be manipulated by others? Don't worry. I definitely won't agree to something as nonsensical as a marriage alliance. I've already thought about it. Imperial Father has so many concubines. It doesn't matter if he takes 1 or 10. When the time comes, I'll just let this princess marry him as his concubine. Jolin looked at Mou as if she was looking at God. The meaning in her eyes were somewhat indescribable. She really wanted to ask this young man in front of her, Are you really your father's son? How could you arrange a concubine for your own father? Did you even consider your own mother's feelings? She was indeed a peerless weirdo. Mou didn't notice the look in Shaolin Er's eyes as he continued to plan. What do you think of my idea? Not bad, right? Look at my father. He can't do anything, but he's number one in life. If I were to suggest that he accept this princess, he would definitely agree. Jolin looked at the old man with a strange, frozen expression. After a while, he stammered, This matter is a little inappropriate. What's wrong? Mou furrowed his slender brows. His restless claws gripped the little girl's small hand tightly as he shifted half of his body closer to her. Didn't you say that her aunt is your father's new favorite for the past 2 years? Moyu rolled her eyes. You're worried about this. That's not a problem, I'm telling you. So what if my aunt is in my father's palace? If this niece enters the palace, won't the family be reunited? PFFF Jolin tilted her small face and almost choked on her own saliva. I feel that your current development is a bit worse than Big Brother's. This was the truth. Thinking back, when Big Brother was still the crown prince, he didn't seem to have screwed over the old great king like this. The old great king had really committed an old sin. Why were both his sons so screwed over in the end? Moyu became agitated and tightly gripped Jolin's small hand. He asked agitatedly, Then do you feel that I've already surpassed my father? Jolin's gaze fell on their intertwined hands, and her face inexplicably heated up. What the hell was going on? When did her small hand get grabbed? She angrily pulled her hand back and lifted the curtain. Without another word, she threw this crown prince you out. Scram. Unrestrained syllables slowly rippled through the summer night. On the sparkling riverside, Steamed Bun's imperial bodyguard and the others turned to look in shock. They saw their elegant and graceful master being thrown out of the carriage by the little girl. Roar! The curtain fell in front of their master with a whoosh. Everyone, oh, it was probably a misconception. It definitely was. With their understanding of the screwed-over crown prince, it wasn't very likely that he was a master who would suffer losses. After Shaolin threw the noisy man out of the carriage, she tossed and turned for most of the night and only fell into a deep sleep when it was almost 10 o'clock in the morning. When she woke up, she found that the carriage was already on the road. The body of the carriage swayed slowly, but it wasn't considered bumpy. She quickly got up and heard a faint, resentful voice from the corner. You're awake? Jolin looked up and saw a certain someone sitting diagonally across from her with an aggrieved expression. Why are you here? This is my carriage. He was furious. This stinky girl actually threw him out of the carriage like this yesterday. Was he shameless? Oh. Jolin looked at the spacious carriage and raised her hand to touch her nose. It seemed that something like this had happened yesterday. She had occupied his carriage and rested for the entire night. When sleeping in Mou's carriage at night, as long as the cover in the middle was put down, it would be a large bed. In the morning, when the cover was turned over, it would be a small tea table with cushioned seats on 3 sides. Rather than sleeping in a damp tent for the entire night, it was better to sleep in the carriage. Commandeering this fellow's carriage was a must. The little girl pursed her lips. I'm hungry. Mou's eyes widened. Your storage talisman is full of food. What she meant was a rich little fellow like you should be the one to take out all the delicious food and share it with us. Jolin had an instinct to protect his food and hurriedly shook his head. Didn't you make porridge this morning? Give me a bowl of porridge. Half a plate of side dishes is enough. The food in the storage talisman wouldn't spoil. She just liked to store things and keep them for herself to slowly enjoy. Stingy, Mou lightly snorted and lifted the carriage curtain to say a few words outside. Not long after, someone brought a piping hot pot of porridge into the carriage, along with 4 plates of pastries and 4 plates of side dishes. It was quite a sumptuous meal. Jolin's large eyes lit up, and she immediately felt that her life was complete. She turned and jumped off the carriage to wash her face by the river. She quickly jumped back into the carriage and picked up her small bowl of porridge to eat. I remember that you're a water spirit. Min, what's wrong? Then why did you go to the river to wash up just now? Second Miss Chiao gave him a strange look. Because I'm happy. There was clean river water outside to wash her face. Why would she waste her own water spirit? She didn't need to replenish her spiritual power. Chapter 5769. Wouldn't it be better to use water? It's clean and refreshing. The river is full of small floating things. Don't you think before Mou could finish his sentence, his mouth was stuffed by the little girl's pastry. So long-winded. Jolin rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. Small floating things? So picky. Jolin took a piece of pastry and put it into her mouth. As she ate, she glanced at him with a warning look. If you keep nagging, I'll kick you out of the carriage. Mou guessed the little girl's meaning and silently shut his mouth. The carriage moved forward slowly. Mou took a sip of tea and asked mildly, "What do you plan to do with that woman?" After yesterday's commotion, that woman fainted again. In the end, she managed to escape and did not do anything to her. Now that a day had passed, Mou naturally wanted to ask the little girl's opinion. If the little girl wanted to punish her, then it was reasonable. After all, someone had touched her four-winged snow colt. This was not a joke. Forget it. Jolene pursed her lips and waved her hand. She wasn't in the mood to talk to that woman again. Looking at that woman's body, she seemed to be very weak and would faint at any moment. If she fainted before she could deal with her, she wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. No one would say that she was bullying the weak. "You're so kind," Mou snorted. There was some dissatisfaction in his words. Jolene could not help but smile. After breakfast, the carriage traveled for more than 4 hours. At noon, they rested in the wilderness for more than an hour. This time, there was no danger. Nothing happened. Princess Huaizhu, who had fainted several times, was also helped out of the carriage. Her face was still a little pale. She looked weak and delicate. When she spoke, it was as if she was going to startle a small animal. Her voice was as small as a mosquito's and could not be heard if one did not get close. Jolene was as active as a boy. Otherwise, she would not have pestered her sister and insisted on going to the army camp with Qiao Senator. She hated to see such a delicate girl who looked like a little white flower. She felt that she could be blown away by the wind. Therefore, when she saw the princess coming down for a walk, she simply walked further away and jumped onto a tree to enjoy the scenery. Princess Huaizhu's eyes flashed. Qing Luo, who was accompanying them, muttered to himself in dissatisfaction, "Princess, what is the meaning of this? Does he not want to see you?" This was too obvious. As soon as she saw her supporting the princess, the little girl flashed away and flew so high and far away. It was obvious that she wanted to avoid them and didn't want to chat with them. Princess Huaizhu waved her hand indifferently and said ambiguously, "Fine, I don't want to talk too much with such unruly people." Looking at this girl's behavior, she was too free and undisciplined. It was obvious that she had not received a good education. There was no point in lowering his status by talking nonsense with her. Qing Luo nodded and supported Princess Huaizhu as they strolled in the wilderness. Only when the leader of the group called for them to gather did they return to the carriage. After a few days of traveling peacefully, one evening, they entered a mountain forest that was shrouded in dark fog. Mou said to Xiao "From the moment you step into the forest, you've entered the vicinity of the undead village. Be careful." Jolene was a little excited. Along the way, not to mention zombies, they hadn't even seen a single beast that didn't have eyes. While this made her feel bored, it also made her miss the days of fighting zombies. Thinking back to when they were fleeing, there were so many zombies that they covered the sky and earth. Every time they saw one, they would explode. Now, it was so peaceful that she almost couldn't believe it. The lower star domain was really different from before. She couldn't help but think to herself, "Mou, you didn't look very reliable on the surface, but looking at the smooth weather along the way and the peaceful lives of the people, one could tell that this guy was actually quite reliable. At least, he was many times better than that bear of a father of his." Brother Yu was just getting off the carriage when he turned back and caught a glimpse of the little girl. He couldn't help but blink. "You're sneaking glances at me." Xiaolin hurriedly retracted her gaze and jumped down. Looking around at the dark fog, she frowned and said, "Are we staying here tonight?" Once we enter the undead village, the fog will be even thicker. We won't be able to see anyone in front or behind us." Mou nodded and said, "Especially at night. It's even more so. We're still on the outskirts of the village, so we can still see a little clearly." Seeing this little girl squirming around beside him, Mou couldn't help but rub her forehead. "That's why I want you to stay by my side. Don't run too far away. Don't take this lightly." Got it. Xiao waved her hand and sniffed her little nose. She leaned closer to Mou and said, "Let me tell you, there should be zombies here. You smell it?" Mou couldn't help but tease in amusement. Jolene nodded his big head vigorously. I smell it. It's that extremely rotten smell of rotting corpses. MOU. He almost didn't know what to say. He felt like he couldn't continue the conversation. Jolin looked around and glanced at MOU. You don't believe me? Yes, I believe you. MOU nodded helplessly and turned to whisper some instructions to Steamed Bun. Steamed Bun quickly ordered everyone to set up camp and rest. They planned to set off for the undead village tomorrow morning. Suddenly, they heard a cry of surprise from nearby. Everyone looked over and saw Qing Luo supporting their princess Huai Zhu as they ran over. Her forehead was covered in sweat and her face was pale. Your Highness there. There's a snake over there. Everyone couldn't help but roll their eyes. So what if it was a snake? You're all mystic cultivators, not ordinary people who don't even have the strength to trust a chicken. You're too weak to be scared to this extent by a snake. Princess Huai Zhu read the meaning behind everyone's gazes and couldn't help but feel resentful. Although she had some mystic energy, she had been pampered since she was young. When had she ever spent the night in this kind of deep mountain forest? There was wet vegetation nearby, and snakes and insects would occasionally scurry out of the trees. Every minute and every second challenged her fragile nerves. From now until we leave the village, we can't ride horses or carriages. Make preparations, MOU instructed indifferently. He had already stored the horses, carriages, and other items in his storage talisman. Everyone set up camp and didn't say anything else. From time to time, they would hear Princess Huai Zhu's screams. She was probably scared out of her wits because she saw another snake or insect. Jolin and MOU glanced at each other and saw a trace of speechlessness in each other's eyes. This princess was so delicate. She shouldn't be going out. Why would she be so particular when she was outside? Chapter 5770. This wouldn't do, that wouldn't do. She had to bring along a portable house. Unfortunately, her heart was higher than the sky, and her life was thinner than paper. She didn't have the fortune of having a portable spirit domain. Xiao Lin couldn't help but ask helplessly, how about I go over and take care of them for them? No need. In terms of ruthlessness, no one could beat the Mo family's ruthlessness. That kind of indifference and contempt that came from the depths of their bones was absolutely innate. It's not like they don't have hands and feet. If they don't know how to take care of them, they'll just be food for poisonous insects and snakes. It was simply baffling. He naturally didn't believe that the Grand Princess of the Hoarding Kingdom wouldn't bring along a few capable people with powerful mystic skills. She was merely using this kind of brainless method to attract his attention. He really couldn't bear to see such baffling tricks. Xiaolin. In reality, she only wanted to reach the Mo Kingdom capital safely and steadily, and then meet up with her sister and the rest. She didn't care about the other trivial matters. MOU swiped his hand, taking out a small white jade tent. The tip of the tent was pointed, and it emitted bits of brilliant light in his palm. Xiaolin nearly jumped up. You stole this from brother-in-law, right? This was clearly a top-notch spatial divine tool. Brother-in-law most likely made it when he was idle. MOU glanced at her and pursed his lips. Don't tell me you didn't have it. The wilderness they were in a few days ago wasn't as vile as today, so the two tacitly made do for a few nights. But today's fog-shrouded land was very different from before. The air was filled with a moldy smell. Even if they squeezed into a normal tent, it would still be a crime. These two fellows were essentially the same kind. They were more accustomed to living like princes, so they naturally wouldn't wrong themselves. Even if MOU, this punk, didn't take out the divine tool, Xiao Lin would most likely take it out. The two silently exchanged glances and both snorted. MOU tossed the small white tent in his hand into the distance. A 2-meter-tall tent quickly appeared. It looked like it was constructed from jade, sturdy, and sheltered from the wind. The two entered the tent one after the other. Xiaolin also put away her four-winged snowfoal. When Steamed Bun saw this, he hurriedly slipped in. Following him were a few of the Crown Prince's secret attendants. The interior of the jade tent was very spacious. There were at least 7 or 8 rooms. Jolin glanced at her and immediately shook her little head proudly. It was not as big as her mobile tent, nor was it as spacious. Even the rooms and decorations inside were not as good as hers. As expected, his sister was still the best. Whatever her sister had, Shaolin had as well. What big brother has, this brat you might not have. Imoyu turned to look at her and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is a divine artifact that Big Brother made in the early stages. Naturally, it can't compare to the divine artifact in your hands. Shaolin turned around and made a face at him before skipping into the last room on the left. The tent made of jade not only had a god-level defense function, but it was also soundproof and moisture-proof. It was warm in winter and cool in summer, soothing the mind and helping one sleep. Therefore, he slept well that night. The next day, when she came out of the tent, she saw Princess Huaizhu and her servants looking at her with dark circles under their eyes. What Shaolin didn't know was that after they entered the tent to rest last night, the sharp-eyed Qing Luo saw that Prince Yu had made such a good item and hurriedly reminded his master. The master and servants arrived in front of the tent, shouting and yelling. Unfortunately, the tent was soundproof, and the people inside couldn't hear them at all. Yu and the others had long since gone to meditate and rest. Naturally, they did not know that Princess Huaizhu and her servants had spent most of the night in front of their tents. In the end, the two guards couldn't stand it anymore and persuaded him to leave. If they continued to yell and shout like this, no one in the camp would be able to rest. Shaolin had a baffled look on her face as she walked over to the bonfire and sat down. Steamed Bun Imperial Bodyguard hurriedly brought her porridge, noodles, and other food. As Shaolin ate, she received various glances from Princess Huaizhu from time to time. What's wrong with them? Shaolin looked at Steamed Bun Imperial Bodyguard with a puzzled expression. Steamed Bun Imperial Bodyguard helplessly curled his lips and whispered, "Second miss, you don't know. But after we entered the jade tent with His Highness last night, Princess Huaizhu and her servants have been wandering around outside the tent, wanting to go in. It's just that our jade tent is soundproof, so we didn't hear them yelling for half the night." Shaolin nodded speechlessly, thinking, this princess really spared no effort to get close to Imoyu. She must have really put in a lot of effort. But why do I always feel uncomfortable in my heart? It's probably because this Princess Huaizhu is too weak and delicate. She's not the type of person I want to be friends with. Imoyu walked out of the tent and put it away with a wave of his hand. Qing Luo sat next to Princess Huaizhu and carefully said, "They spent the night in comfort and didn't even think about our princess." Princess Huaizhu's delicate body was precious, but she had to spend the night in the open. Those little bugs and cockroaches made Princess Huaizhu's face pale. As servants, they all felt distressed. The princess has never suffered such grievances since she was young. So why doesn't His Highness Imoyu know how to take care of his own princess? Also, this Qiao's second miss from the mountains is really not a good thing. Her skin was thick, and she wasn't afraid of being bitten by mosquitoes. She even relied on the fact that she had known His Highness since she was young to shamelessly stay in the same tent as His Highness. A man and a woman alone for a night was truly shameless. At this time, they had long forgotten that there were 4 or 5 personal guards who went in with Imoyu. How could Huaizhu and the others know that the jade tent was divided into 7 or 8 small rooms? They only thought that Qiao's second miss was shamelessly sticking to His Highness and staying in the same tent with him. With their eyesight, they could only see that the material of the tent was much better than ordinary tents. At night, it was only able to ward off some snakes and insects. Princess Huaizhu's heart was filled with unhappiness. After these days of interaction, she could also see that this His Highness Imoyu really didn't have any other thoughts about her. He didn't even give her aunt, Imperial Concubine Li, any face. Otherwise, he wouldn't treat Qinyan like this and remove him from his post without any mercy. Now, Qinyan was still tied up at the back of the camp and couldn't even see him on a normal day. Huaizhu didn't know what Qinyan's situation was. Imoyu casually ate some food and then ordered everyone to set out. Princess Huaizhu saw that he didn't even spare her a glance and couldn't help but feel depressed. Chapter 5771. Princess, we have to be careful when we enter this village. Qing Luo moved closer to Princess Huaizhu and said with a frightened expression, I heard that this village is a bit unclean. Princess Huaizhu was still feeling stifled. Hearing Qing Luo's words, she couldn't help but feel irritated. What do you mean by unclean? Could it be that there are wraiths in this small village? Qing Luo nodded subconsciously. She moved closer to Princess Huaizhu and whispered, I heard that when His Highness the Crown Prince's group passed by this place, 2 people disappeared for no reason. They haven't been found since. Huaizhu was a little creeped out by her sneaky look. She pushed Qing Luo's arm away and forced herself to calm down. Ridiculous. There must be someone hiding in the shadows, trying to act mysterious when no one is paying attention. Huaizhu suddenly stopped talking. She frowned as she looked at the group gathering quickly. Those Mo Kingdom soldiers moved rather quickly. In a flash, they were already far away. Qing Luo saw that the group had finished their preparations and had already entered the undead village. She hurriedly urged Princess Huaizhu, Princess, there are many things that we'd rather believe than not. Let's hurry up and follow. What do you think? Huaizhu wasn't very brave. Seeing the group moving forward, leaving her a large distance behind, she couldn't help but feel anxious. What are you talking about? Why aren't you following? Unexpectedly, she looked back and saw that the road they had come from was covered with a thick gray fog, and visibility was very low. He had a feeling that something terrifying was hidden in this gloomy fog. Princess Huaizhu's body trembled slightly. She hurriedly said to Qing Luo, Hurry up and follow. Stop talking nonsense. Qing Luo didn't know what to say. Most of the group had already moved forward, but she was still nagging by her ear. Princess Huaizhu glared resentfully at the maid. She hurriedly had 2 maids support her and jog forward. On the other side, Jolin waved her hand to disperse the thick fog in front of her. She calmly took out a thick scarf from her inner world and covered her entire face. The visibility in front of them was getting lower and lower. It was almost impossible to see anything within half a meter. Everyone's hearts sank. They couldn't help but quicken their steps. They followed closely behind, hoping that they wouldn't fall behind. Steam Bun would make everyone report their numbers every once in a while. Excluding the princess and her party, they had a total of 368 teammates. Nothing out of the ordinary had happened yet, but Steam Bun's expression was extremely serious. After all, they had lost 2 of their teammates when they passed by the undead village. This incident was still fresh in their minds, and they still had not figured out what had happened. Everyone, follow me. Steam Bun said, What's the situation behind us? Princess Huaizhu, how many people do you have on your side? Have you counted them? Princess Huaizhu looked at Qing Luo with a puzzled expression. Qing Luo hurriedly said, There are 115 of them. Is the number correct? Steam Bun said in a clear voice, Remember to count the number of people at any time. The brothers walking at the back should pay more attention to each other. These words made everyone's hair stand on end. They couldn't help but want to quicken their pace and hug each other for warmth. Jolin took out a small butterfly. Its butterfly tail swayed gently, and a stream of light swept past. The little butterfly flew to the front and fluttered forward. Even a thick fog couldn't block the sparkling light. This butterfly can pass through the dense fog and guide us in the right direction? Black Jade asked curiously. Jolin nodded. Just follow him. Steam Bun's spirits were roused, and he shouted, Everyone, follow closely and count off. Jolin couldn't help but ridicule. He had just freaking counted off 3 minutes ago, and now he was doing it again. Wasn't Steam Bun being too cautious? The frequency of counting off was a bit too high. The group of people finished counting off one by one. Princess Huaizhu said softly, Then let's also count off. This way, everyone can feel more at ease. Qing Luo nodded and said, The people of Jiang count off. Everyone, Remember the number you reported this time. Wait for the count off at any time. When the Jiang soldiers finished counting off at 114, the crowd froze for as long as a minute. The group of Northern Immerse soldiers seemed to have exploded, all talking at once. Just now, they reported 114 people. Didn't they say there were a total of 115 people? That's right, that's right. I heard it very clearly. That's what they said. They're missing one, right? They're missing one. They're missing one. Hurry and check. Princess Huaizhu didn't understand at first, but after hearing everyone's words, her hair stood on end. Qing Luo's small face was pale with fright, and he couldn't stop asking in a trembling voice, "PR Princess, what do we do now?" "Count off again." 1, 2. The Jiang soldiers quickly finished counting off. This time, it was even worse. There was no more after counting off at 113. Another one is missing. Another one is missing? Everyone started to panic, especially the Jiang soldiers at the very back of the group. In their panic, they suddenly screamed and madly ran forward, knocking down several people in succession. MOU coldly said, "Don't panic. Stand in your own positions. Take out all the light tools you can use." Dim rays of light appeared one after another in the fog. Jolin whispered, "This situation isn't right. Should we put them into storage talismans to hide? If they can't even survive such a small setback, how can they become a true hero?" MOU whispered back. Xiaolin raised his head to look at him. Amidst the dark mist, he could see that his bright black eyes were shining with starry light. The little girl curled her lips and secretly complained, "What a man! Keep moving forward." "Don't panic," Steam Bun said loudly. There's someone in the fog." At the back of the group, among the Jiang soldiers, someone suddenly shouted in a trembling voice, "It's not a person at all. It's a ghost. It's flying too fast. We can't see it clearly. Don't push and shove. You're pushing and shoving the princess." Qing Luo anxiously roared. He put one hand in front of Princess Huaizhu, protecting her as they retreated. "Careful," MOU exclaimed in a low voice. She raised her hand and sent out a stream of divine power, blocking something that suddenly flew in front of Jolin with a clang. Jolin's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw what was flying over. "It's a flying claw." The little girl tugged at MOU's clothes. She suddenly realized. The other party used this flying claw to catch people. Through the thick fog, visibility was extremely low. It was simply too easy to use a flying claw to drag away a few people from the back of the group without anyone noticing. "Outrageous!" Steam Bun shouted angrily. "Who's playing tricks here? Come out." Chapter 5772. All of a sudden, a large amount of white medicinal powder was sprinkled in front of everyone. Jolin stuffed a pill into MOU's hand and used a thick scarf to cover her mouth and nose. She said in a low, muffled voice, "Those who come don't come with good intentions." Suddenly, she felt a claw grab her from behind, and her body flew backward involuntarily. MOU reacted quickly and grabbed Jolin's arm. A huge force came from the depths of the dense fog, and even she was pulled over. "Your Highness!" Bodyguard Steam Bun was shocked and hurriedly shot out. He saw His Highness pulling second Miss Qiao, and the two of them were pulled into the depths of the forest by hooks. Xiaolin suddenly felt her body lighten as she was hugged by MOU. She instinctively reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck as she looked around her surroundings. But she saw that the Yin fog where they were standing was even thicker than before. A small building faintly stood in the depths of the Yin fog, and the two of them couldn't see it clearly with their eyesight. Jolin wasn't very nervous, and she looked into the distance curiously. She saw a black shadow slide past their eyes with a whoosh. MOU put her down and tightly held her small hand. He said in a low voice, "Be careful," pretending to be mysterious. Jolin pursed her lips and suddenly took out a fire spirit talisman, throwing it in the direction the black shadow had suddenly rushed out. Boom! A bright flame lit up. The bright flame suddenly scattered the Yin fog in front of them, illuminating the black shadow in front of them. That thing roared and turned its face around. The two of them saw that half of its face was scorched and blackened, and only one eye was left, looking at them with a sinister expression. A corpse puppet? Without another word, Jolin threw out another 4 or 5 talismans, encircling the man with half a black face. This half-human, half-ghost thing roared several times and dashed left and right among the 4 or 5 confinement talismans, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it roared angrily at the two of them. Mo rushed forward, and with a flash of his sword, he picked up several red-hot branches and threw them at the strange person. Although that person's movements weren't very agile, he actually knew how to dodge the fire. However, his movements weren't coordinated enough. His left foot tripped over his right foot, and he fell to the ground. Mo raised her hand and threw out a flying sword, which nailed the man's palm to the ground with a whoosh. Jolin was just about to run forward when Black Jade pulled him back. "Don't be so rash." Jolin turned around and glared at him a few times. He wanted to retort, but then he saw the strange man who had been nailed to the ground by the flying sword pull his hand forcefully and jump up. Ignoring the pain of having half of his hand cut off, the strange man clutched his severed hand and hurriedly fled. Jolin couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment before he muttered in a low voice, "I wonder if it's a human or a corpse puppet. Escaped quite quickly. He can't have escaped far. His lair should be up ahead." Mo turned and nodded at Shaolin. "Let's go take a look." Jolin lowered his head and saw that his hand had been held in that fellow's hand the entire time, and he hadn't let go even now. The little girl was a little embarrassed, and a strange feeling arose in her heart. She swung her hand a few times, but couldn't fling the man's hand away. She looked up and saw the latter's calm and solemn expression, as if he hadn't noticed that he was holding another girl's hand and walking forward. Jolin was just about to yell when Mo shushed her and tightened his grip on her hand. He pulled her along and jogged a few steps, squatting behind a bush, and motioned for her to look ahead. She saw that the strange man, who had escaped with his injuries earlier, was now in a row of open space in front of them. He turned left 3 times, right 2 times, and hopped up and down a few times before running toward the small house in the middle. Jolin said in a low voice. "I didn't expect that there would be a maze array in this abandoned and run-down little village." Mo raised his brows. Jolin continued, "But this array isn't very complete anymore. It seems that it's not very effective because of its age." Mo nodded and whispered in her ear, "Then let's approach carefully." Jolin only felt waves of heat by her ear, and her little face couldn't help but redden. She turned her head and glared at him in annoyance, wanting to fling her hand away, but he held it tightly in his hand, and she couldn't break free. "Don't be impatient." This guy nodded at her in all seriousness and glanced at her. "When we get to the small house later, remember to follow behind me. Don't act rashly if I haven't convinced you." "Hey!" This guy actually dared to boss her around. The little girl glared at him a few times in annoyance, but Mo pretended not to see. The two of them came out of the bush they were hiding in and quietly approached the broken array. Both of them were smart people, and they had already memorized the strange man's walking pattern by heart. As long as they followed the strange man's walking pattern, turning left 3 times and right 2 times, they naturally wouldn't be able to touch this broken array. After successfully passing through, the small house was in front of them. Right at this moment, the wind rustled the grass, and a rustling sound made Second Miss Chiao's hair stand on end. This sound, Second Miss Chiao's large eyes widened as she turned to look. She saw a huge python more than 3 meters long, raising its sinister snake head, coming out from behind the small house. At this moment, it was spitting out its scarlet tongue, and its inverted triangular eyes stared fixedly at the two of them. "Oh my God, it's a disgusting snake." Second Miss Chiao forced herself to calm down, but her body couldn't help but squeeze closer to Mo. Mo, who was carefully sizing up the python head, suddenly felt something and lowered his head to take a look. He saw that almost half of the little girl's body was in his embrace, and her expression was so nervous that he couldn't help but find it funny. Didn't you have a lot of fun playing with that little white snake by sister-in-law's side? How can that be the same? The little white snake's eyes were big and cute, and the python in front of them was covered in black and swarthy skin. There was no comparison at all. The most important point was that this python didn't look like a good person, and it was probably going to attack them. You go. Xiaolin pushed Mou and stuck her small head out from behind him, looking at the python head with disdain. Compared to the little white snake's appearance, it was on a completely different level. Mou curled his lips in amusement, and his eyes suddenly turned cold as he reached out to release a huge beast. Roar! The fire dragon's hard claws hit a rock, and it was like crushing a row of tofu. Ah, when did you contract a sacred beast? Xiaolin exclaimed in hindsight. Holy shit, this guy was really good at hiding. He didn't summon any beasts along the way, and she only found out now that this guy still had such a trick up his sleeve. Mou blinked innocently. You didn't ask. That four-tailed eagle that's always by your side isn't your contracted beast. It isn't. I used sister-in-law's summoning talisman to play with it. Xiaolin raised her hand and knocked his big head. Brother-in-law caught this sacred beast for you. If the python could speak now, it would probably greet 18 generations of Mou's ancestors. Chapter 5773. It had been in the Lower Star region for so long, and it had finally evolved into a spirit snake. Now that the other party had suddenly summoned a sacred fire-swallowing dragon, what was he trying to do? Could the Lower Star region allow such a thing to exist? Was that old heavenly Tao dead or crippled? Why didn't he show up and say something fair? Roar! A mouthful of angry flames sprayed onto the giant python's coiled body. The giant python didn't even have time to escape before it was completely ignited by that mouthful of angry flames. It hissed and fell to the ground, rolling back and forth. Black Jade pulled little Lin back a few steps and watched coldly as the python's tail rubbed against each other, causing dust to fly everywhere. Jolin couldn't help but shake her head. Sigh, why didn't it just live properly? Why did it have to come out and scare people? Roar! After a roar, the strange person they had seen before suddenly jumped down from the second floor of the small building. He held a broom in his hand and was using all his might to hit the python's body. Unfortunately, how could the sacred beast dragon flames be extinguished so easily? No matter how he hit it, the ignited flames still mercilessly swallowed up the python's body inch by inch. In just a moment, the giant python was swallowed by the flames. The strange person roared and suddenly turned his head. His single eye glowed with an eerie cold light as he glared at her and Black Jade. You were the one who provoked us first. You can't blame others. Jolin sneered and said calmly, if this strange person hadn't secretly used a grappling hook to catch people in their team and released the python to bite them, how could they have easily dealt with the python? Now, he was still glaring at them with such a hateful gaze, as if they had done something wrong. What a joke. A faint long sword appeared in Black Jade's hand. There's no need to say anything to him. Look at him. He should be a half-mutated corpse puppet. But for some reason, he seems to have retained a trace of human consciousness. Kill him. As soon as Black Jade finished speaking, the fire-breathing dragon swiped its claw in the direction of the strange person. Black Jade waved her hand and flew in front of the giant dragon. Leave it to me. With that, she recalled the fire-breathing dragon. The long sword flew, and in a breath, it was already in front of the strange person. Clang! The sword landed on the strange man's skin, as if it had cut through a thin layer of metal. Xiaolin blinked and ran closer to see that the two of them had quickly exchanged dozens of blows. It was obvious that the strange man was being forced back by Mou. Go in and take a look. Mou gestured towards the small building. Jolin nodded in understanding. In a flash, he slipped past the two and went straight to the small building. This move seemed to have angered the eccentric. Jolin heard an angry roar coming from behind him, but it quickly stopped. Xiaolin turned around and saw half of the strange man's scorched and blackened face contorting in pain. His only I was staring straight at her. Jolin didn't care how vicious his gaze was and flew straight into the small building. Then he heard a low growl. Jolin's arm was covered with a layer of water spirit barrier, and he raised his arm to block the attack. Clang! The opponent's claws, which were as hard as iron, knocked against her water spiritual barrier, but were quickly blocked. Jolin turned to look, and her scalp was about to explode. She saw a ghastly zombie standing behind her, swaying. Its face was covered with rotten flesh, and it was impossible to see what it looked like. Judging from its shape, it seemed to be a woman. Its entire body was in tatters, and rags hung on its body. One of its arms was twisted in an abnormal way because of the recoil from Jolin's water spiritual barrier. Jolin took a deep breath and subconsciously took 2 steps back. It wasn't that she was afraid of this high-level zombie in front of her. It was just that this zombie emitted a rotten stench, and it was too pungent. She subconsciously wanted to run as far away as possible. It would be best if she didn't smell it. The female zombie roared and pounced in Jolin's direction again. Jolin was prepared this time, so she wouldn't let her hit her body. As the female zombie pounced, Jolin dodged to the side, and at the same time, threw out a spiritual energy ball. The spiritual energy hit the zombie's face and exploded. After a huge tremor, the strange man's shrill roar came from outside. There was a loud boom. Jolin turned to look and saw that Ink Jade had kicked the strange man in through the door. He rolled like a gourd and hit the leg of the table, and then the short cabinet on the opposite side. The things on top of the short cabinet were all thrown down. Half of the cabinet smashed onto the strange man's body. The air froze for a moment, and all sound came to a complete halt. Xiaolin looked at the dying strange man on the ground under the short cabinet with a serious expression. He then turned to look at the female corpse puppet whose head had been blasted away by the explosion of the spirit energy ball. Naturally, he killed the female corpse puppet by blasting its head open with brute force. It was completely dead, and there was no possibility of resurrection. Jolin looked disgusted and moved closer to Ink Jade, who was walking over quickly. Ink Jade's expression was also very unpleasant. I didn't expect there to be a female zombie hiding in here. How are you? Have you been attacked? No. Jolin's expression was sour, and she waved her little hand hard. The smell is too bad. Let's get out quickly. Wait. Ink Jade grabbed her hand. Block your 5 senses first. Let's go upstairs and take a look. When the two reached the 2nd floor of the wooden building, they were both shocked. Jolin hurriedly turned and rushed out of the wooden building. She found a random place and threw up. The 2nd floor was like a large slaughterhouse. Dried meat hung from the beams, and the disgusting smell of blood filled the air. Ink Jade's expression was cold. She dragged the dying strange man out of the wooden building and slammed him to the ground. After a dull thud, the strange man struggled to raise his head and stared at the two of them coldly. You killed my wife. You deserve to die. You deserve to die. Jolin was furious. She went up and kicked his head hard. Lunatic, a real lunatic. In order to feed his wife, he turned all the people in the village passing by into the female zombie's food and stored them upstairs. What a sick person. Moreover, in order to capture these rations, this half-human, half-ghost thing even designed something like a hook lock. It could directly drag people through the Een fog and capture them effortlessly. If they encountered experts like mystic cultivators, they would encounter resistance. But with that giant python spirit beast, resistance was mostly useless. If they encountered ordinary villagers passing by, capturing these rations would be as easy as taking something out of a bag. What do you know? What do you know? My wife is the best woman in the world. The strange man lay on the ground and roared angrily, but he was like an arrow at the end of its flight. He spat out mouthfuls of blood when he opened his mouth. Chapter 5774. Jolin looked at him coldly. So, this is the best way for you to keep her here? You clearly know that she's already lost consciousness, but you still use the stupidest method to keep her here. Why don't you take her out for treatment? Do you know to what extent the medicinal liquid in our hands has been developed? Our treatment solution can awaken a special grade zombie's consciousness. It can effectively stop the zombie from continuing to mutate. There's medicine that can save her. If you take her to Seacone Planet's zombie rescue station, you can change her fate. But now, he missed the best time for the zombie's treatment. This man was bound to pay the heaviest price for his stupidity. The strange man crouched on the ground as if he heard a fantasy story. He roared with all his might, "No, impossible! You're lying to me! Lying to me!" Jolin looked at him sympathetically. The outside world has already been turned upside down. Except for some zombies with special circumstances that can't be saved, most of them have been saved. Your wife is a high-level zombie. Logically speaking, she can be saved. Jolin shook his head indifferently. It's just that you've dragged this out for too long. That female zombie's entire body was rotten and ruined, so there was no way to save her. Moreover, she had eaten so many living people here, so there was no way to save her for various reasons. That was why Jolin said that it was this strange man's arrogance and stupidity that ruined the female zombie. Mou glanced coolly at the strange man and said to Jolin, "Why do you have to talk so much nonsense with him? He was already a dead person anyway, so there was no need to say so much. Everyone had to walk their own path. This strange man had chosen to hide in the undead village and capture ordinary people to raise his wife. His brain was quite nimble, and he even knew to use the ghost village shrouded in fog as bait to wreak havoc here for a while." Jolin sighed at him and nodded. "Send him on his way. It'll be a family reunion." That strange man actually started snickering when he heard that. His eyes were filled with fury as he stared fixedly at Jolin and Mou. "I won't let you off even if I become a ghost." There was a light smack. An arrow was nailed into that person's heart without any explanation. He didn't even let him finish speaking before he sent him on his way. Jolin shook his head helplessly. He had clearly done something wrong, yet he still wanted to vent his hatred on others. It was truly laughable. They weren't afraid of living people, but how could they be afraid of a dead ghost? The two of them simply set fire to the wooden building and burned it to the ground. As the flames soared into the sky, it naturally attracted the secret guards and the others to search for it. By the time they found it, the wooden building had already turned into ashes. Steam Bun said with lingering fear, "I didn't think that there would be such a big spirit python hidden here. Your Highness, Second Miss Chiao, are you all right? What could happen to us?" The two of them said in unison and looked at each other. Jolin thought to himself, "Humph, it's a good thing you didn't come. If you came here and found out that your Highness had summoned a fire-breathing sacred beast, you would be very surprised." Steam Bun smiled and said, "Since there's nothing else, let's hurry on our way." The surrounding environment was dark and damp, making people feel uncomfortable. If they could walk, it was best to leave this place as soon as possible. Black Jade nodded and turned to look at Jolin. "Lin, do you have something to dispel the miasma and fog?" "I do, but it would take at least an hour to get rid of such a large area of dark and gloomy fog." "That's fine. We'll just rest here for an hour. It won't be too late to leave after the fog has dissipated." Jolin thought it made sense, so he took out a few pills to dispel the miasma and handed them to Steam Bun. Princess Huaizhu had been standing on the side and hadn't said anything. When she heard Black Jade's words, she couldn't help but interrupt. "Since you can dispel the fog, why didn't you take it out when we entered the village?" Her words carried a hint of mockery. Jolin glanced at her, but before he could speak, Black Jade said indifferently, "You didn't think about it earlier?" He only remembered when he saw Shaolin, that he had only asked to test the waters. It would be best if she did, but if she didn't, he would act as usual. Princess Huaizhu was furious. She thought to herself, "You're really diligent in protecting this little demon. I only said something, and you immediately rebuked me." Jolin ignored her and sat to the side to rest. What happened to Sure Hao and his wife made her feel very uncomfortable. She felt that such a tragedy shouldn't have happened. Qing Luo walked to Huaizhu's side and tugged at her sleeve, persuading her in a low voice, Princess, it's best not to get into a conflict with this second Miss Xiao for now. Everything could wait until they returned to the capital. Qing Luo gave Princess Huaizhu a look to restrain herself. Huaizhu thought, that's right. Once we return to the capital, I'll have my concubine mother to back me up. I'll be able to hold my head high then. Princess Huaizhu swung her sleeves and returned to the side of the tree. She sat down on a rock with Qing Luo's help. After sitting for a while, Huaizhu felt something tug at her skirt. Thinking that Qing Luo was tugging at her again, Huaizhu impatiently brushed it away. What are you doing? Not long after, something tugged at him again. If you have something to say, then say it. Princess Huaizhu's expression grew increasingly impatient. Qing Luo turned her head in confusion when she heard her suddenly speak. Then, her eyes widened and she screamed in fright, "Princess, what are you shouting about?" Princess Huaizhu's eardrums hurt from her sudden shout. Qing Luo swallowed her saliva, her entire face filled with fear. Princess! Qing Luo and the maids beside her all retreated a few steps in unison, staring in the direction of Princess Huaizhu's back in fright. What are you doing? Huaizhu turned her head in irritation and suddenly saw a skeletal face behind her. Ah! She cried out in alarm and jumped up. Goosebumps rose all over her body. Only then did she see clearly that there were skeletal monkeys of all sizes standing behind her. Princess Huaizhu almost fainted at the thought of how those damned things had been so noiselessly leaning against her back. She forced herself to calmly take a few steps back and called out in a trembling voice, Qing Luo. Whoosh! A pillar of water suddenly fell on a few of the monkeys, sending them flying. Jolin coldly said, "What are you all standing there for? Attack!" With this order, the petrified crowd immediately came to their senses. They released their mystic energy and spiritual energy and launched a long-range attack at the skeletal monkeys. Chapter 5775. The skeleton monkeys jumped up in groups and climbed onto the maids of the Horde Kingdom, tearing them apart. Some maids screamed in horror as they rolled on the ground. Their heads were smashed open by the monkeys' punches and kicks. These monkeys were actually not strong, but they looked a little scary. Everyone was caught off guard, and several people fell into their hands. When they reacted, they saw the maids of the Horde Kingdom being dragged into the forest by the monkeys, squeaking and screaming. Jolin shouted, "Save them!" Everyone sent out waves of spiritual energy at the monkeys. Qing Luo supported Princess Huaizhu and retreated, her face turning green. She stuttered, "Why are there so many damn things here? The fog in this forest is thick. There's nothing here." Jolin felt that this maid was very strange. Everyone who was standing here, more or less, had a bit of profound strength. When faced with danger, wouldn't they be able to resist, hiding at the side and waiting for help? If they were not rescued in time, would they be dragged into the depths of the fog and eaten by the monkeys like those maids who had been captured? These zombified monkeys were extremely strong. They attacked them in groups of a dozen or so. Although their attacks were not very strong, they had the advantage in numbers. Jolin glanced over and saw that there were skulls and monkey heads everywhere. There were at least 1,000 of them. "Let's go," Black Jade ordered, and everyone followed him into the dense fog. Along the way, they slaughtered many skeleton monkeys, but their ears were filled with the screams of the Horde Kingdom's maids. Everyone could not help but shake their heads. They only told them to keep up and did not bother with them. In the face of danger, whose life was not more important? At least, Black Jade was unwilling to lose his subordinates for these idiots. Fortunately, these monkeys only looked scary in numbers. In reality, they only knew how to throw and beat, which was not enough for the many mystic and spiritual cultivators. Everyone fought as they moved forward. Soon, they were out of the encirclement of the skeleton monkeys and saw the village entrance in the distance. Black Jade subconsciously grabbed Jolin's hand and pulled him out of the village. Princess Huaizhu was surrounded by people. She ran until she was out of breath and could not help but clutch her chest and gasp for air. Jolin looked back and couldn't help but shake his head. It was fine if he had a poor foundation in martial arts, but if he couldn't even run for his life, then what kind of future would he have? Her elder sister had once told her that if her cultivation wasn't as good as others, she should at least have the ability to escape and some self-defense skills. This Princess Huaizhu was probably too well protected by the Hoarding Kingdom. She was clearly a mystic cultivator, but she couldn't even kill a low-end zombie. She would only cry and scream when she saw something that had mutated. If she lost her princess status, she would be a piece of trash that anyone could crush with a single finger. Mou couldn't help but laugh when he saw her shaking her head repeatedly. What happened? If you have something to say, say it. Nothing. Jolin was just a little emotional. Tell me about it. Mou held her little hand and quickly walked forward. The village entrance is right in front. It should be fine. I just felt that I should come out to broaden my horizons. There are really all kinds of people out there, Jolin said, pursing her lips. Mou couldn't help but laugh. You just don't like that princess. There's nothing to like about her. Jolin shook her head. They were two types of people who had nothing to do with each other to begin with. After returning to the capital, they went their separate ways, so there was no need for her to dislike her. The daughters of the wealthy families in the capital are also like that. Mou also pursed her lips and said, they're so delicate that it's like they'll immediately die if they carry a bag of rice. Jolin couldn't help but laugh out loud. Don't worry. Which of those noble ladies in the capital hasn't been pranked by my sister before? Now that my sister is back, they'll probably take a detour when they see my sister. Mou couldn't help but laugh out loud when she recalled those past events. Thinking about it, she really felt aggrieved for her old father. Back then, every time the officials were invited to a banquet, as long as the crown princess attended, there would be no good banquets and no good gatherings. In the end, when the officials saw the young crown princess, their hair would stand on end. I remember that group of people later said that every time before attending a palace banquet, they had to stay at home and eat 2 buns before going. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to eat their fill. Jolin laughed out loud. That's right. After 3 rounds of drinking, there's bound to be trouble. There'll definitely be someone who doesn't have eyes to provoke my sister. Her sister wasn't a pushover. She would hit whoever came, and hit both pairs. The two of them chatted about interesting things, and Shaolin danced in front of them. Huaizhu, who was surrounded in a circle, was filled with disgust. She glared at their backs and said sourly, how can there be so much to talk about? The two of them had endless things to talk about when they were together. They talked about all sorts of things that had happened in the past. She really didn't know what to talk about. Ah, princess, be careful. A maidservant cried out in alarm. Suddenly, a monkey that had escaped the net jumped down from above their heads. A skeletal face was about to press against Huaizhu's neck. Huaizhu was so frightened that she screamed again and again. She pushed the maidservant who had warned her over and into the monkey's arms. The skeleton then punched down, immediately smashing the pitiful palace maidservant's head. When everyone saw red and white fall down, they were so frightened that they pissed their pants and fled in all directions. Huaizhu scrambled forward, screaming as she ran, Your Highness, Your Highness. Mou and Jolin were just talking about interesting things when they turned around while holding hands. They saw her running towards them in a sorry state with her hair disheveled and tear-stained face. Behind her, there was also a skeleton monkey covered in human blood, chasing after her relentlessly. How dare you? Imperial bodyguard Steamed Bun stepped forward and pulled out his sword to block in front of the disheveled Huaizhu. The sword in his hand fell, and the skeletal monkey's large head was chopped off by Imperial bodyguard Steamed Bun. It rolled to the side and never moved again. Huaizhu looked as if she was scared stiff. She knelt on the ground with a plop, her entire body so soft that she couldn't even get up. Jolin couldn't help but mutter, trash. It wasn't that Jolin looked down on those with low mystic strength, but this Princess Huaizhu from the inside out, including her heart, was crippled. If she hadn't pushed that palace maidservant to block the skeletal monkey, How could she have died? She only needed to send out a burst of mystic energy to send the skeletal monkey flying. However, she didn't. She could only scream and push her subordinates to their deaths. He really couldn't understand why those idiots by her side still followed her. This person didn't care about the lives of the people around her at all. Probably in her eyes, these palace maidservants were as lowly as grass. It was their good fortune to be able to sacrifice their lives for the princess. Jolan's eyes flashed with a trace of sternness. Chapter 5776. It's such a waste of rice and grain. Hearing this, Imoyu couldn't help but laugh. He lowered his head and glanced at her. Let's go. With that, he held her little hand and walked forward, not even sparing Princess Huaizhu a glance. Seeing this, Huaizhu couldn't help but be enraged. Grief and indignation rose in her heart. She was the princess of the hoarding kingdom. All right? She was a noble princess, but His Highness the Crown Prince didn't care about her at all. With such an attitude, Huaizhu couldn't help but wonder if His Highness the Crown Prince would treat her differently even after they entered the capital. Would Imperial concubine Li's pressure have any effect on the Crown Prince? Thinking of this, Huaizhu couldn't help but feel resentful. She wanted nothing more than for this group of skeleton monkeys to tear Jolan to shreds. However, even as she thought this, she knew very well that with Jolan's skills and abilities, this group of skeleton monkeys was no match for her. The skeleton monkeys also had some understanding of human nature and knew to avoid those powerful people. For example, Jolan's group of detestable monkeys didn't even look at her, nor did they provoke her. They even took a detour when they saw her. They surrounded the hoarding kingdom people with low cultivation and attacked them from all sides. It was simply infuriating. Princess Huaizhu's anger rushed to her chest. She turned and shouted at the servant girl beside her. Are you all dead? Can't you see that this princess is in danger? Hurry up and chase these filthy things away for this princess. Don't let them touch me, you trash. Princess Huaizhu was running wildly. In a moment of carelessness, she tripped over a rock and fell to the ground. She hurriedly reached out and grabbed Qing Luo. Qing Luo was tripped by her. Seeing this, he hurriedly helped her up. Princess, are you all right? Princess? Qing Luo cried out in alarm. Let's go. Seeing the skeleton monkeys surrounding the two of them, Huaizhu's face was filled with shock as she hurriedly shouted. She let Qing Luo support her. Master and servant, one leg higher than the other, chased after the group in front of them. They were already at the very end of the line. The soldiers of the Northern Imo kingdom had long since run away. Even the guards and palace maids by the princess side had fled when they saw that something was wrong. The two of them had no one to turn to for help. The remaining few soft and delicate palace maids were even more useless to them. Seeing that no one was coming to save him, he had no choice but to think of a way to save himself. There were a few servant girls who had the guts to control the profound energy that they hadn't used for a long time, and began to fight with the skeletons that were pouncing on them. One of the palace maids had just killed 2 skeleton monkeys when she was disgusted by their appearance and vomited. Some of the weaker palace maids even rolled their eyes and fainted on the ground. Then, they were beaten unconscious by a small group of skeleton monkeys that surged forward with a few punches. Jolan looked back at the messy scene and couldn't help but mutter, "Are these people all useless?" Among them, there were clearly some who were already level 7 and level 8 mystic cultivators, but each and every one of them seemed like weak women who lacked the strength to truss a chicken. Following that good-for-nothing princess, they were used to living like princes and completely forgot their identities as mystic cultivators. Mou pursed his lips. Ever since the zombie crisis was resolved, most people in the capital have resumed their original lifestyle, especially those noble ladies who were raised in their boudoirs. None of them could carry a burden. Their cultivation clearly wasn't weak, but they all seemed so weak that they would die of exhaustion after taking 2 steps. Especially when they were in front of him, they would faint at the slightest thing and look like they were terminally ill. Mou felt that he had truly seen enough of these women. In comparison, Shaolin was simply a one-of-a-kind little fairy in the world. Those delicate and pretentious women couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as her at all. They couldn't even compare to a single strand of her hair. Nowadays, the world was slowly improving. Song and dance were flourishing, and the country was prosperous and the people were at peace. The great king was still like a dog, shaking off his hands whenever he could. Every now and then, he would want to take his noble consorts out for sightseeing. The crown prince was fully in charge of court affairs, so he was happy to be idle. As for whether the crown prince would occasionally make things difficult for him, that wasn't a problem for the old great king. Everyone swiftly exited Spectre Village. Mo had bodyguard Steam Bun gather everyone at the village entrance to do a head count. Only a few of the northernmost soldiers were slightly bruised, and no one was seriously injured. Shaolin, casually tossed them immediate healing pills, which would allow them to quickly recover. Everyone waited for a short while at the entrance of Spectre Village. Then they saw the attendants, servant girls, and nannies of the Lang kingdom running out one after another in a fluster. This group of people looked like they had been ravaged by something and were completely routed. They ran crookedly. Some people didn't even notice and ran into the same tree one after another. They hugged the tree and wailed in a disgraceful manner. Shaolin simply gasped in amazement as she gazed at them speechlessly. She seemed to have seen a group of rural villagers without any combat ability being forced to retreat repeatedly in defeat by a group of wild monkeys in a mountain forest, fleeing for their lives in panic. Mo stood at the side and asked coolly, "Have they all come out yet?" He stretched out a finger and took out a few mystic energy beads and shook them, planning to explode this group of skeleton monkeys in one fell swoop. Princess is still inside. Princess hasn't come out yet," the maidservants called out anxiously. Earlier, they had been preoccupied with fleeing for their lives and had long thrown the matter of Princess and Prince to the back of their minds. Now that they regained their wits, their complexions were deathly pale and terrified. If something really happened to the princess and she died in this Spectre Village, then they wouldn't be able to live alone and wouldn't need to return. All of them would definitely be buried with the princess. One idiot. She still hasn't come out yet. She's dragging us down. On the other side, Mo cursed incessantly in her heart. She raised her eyes and looked forward, only to see Qing Luo running out with Huai Zhu, half supporting and half dragging her in the dark mist. A large group of monkeys chased after them. Mo flicked her finger, and 5 or 6 mystic energy beads whizzed over, exploding at the entrance of Spectre Village with a rumble. The blast of air threw Huai Zhu and her maidservant several meters forward, heavily tumbling onto the ground. Huai Zhu's mind went blank for a moment. She only felt that the moment she was thrown out, her cheeks seemed to have heavily knocked into the muddy ground, rubbing against something hard like a rock. Half of her face hurt, and she could only cry out, "Ouch, ouch, ouch," as she sprawled on the ground. The maidservants hurriedly surrounded her and helped her up in a flurry, repeatedly calling out, "Princess, princess." Huai Zhu's heart was filled with anger. When she saw the people in front of her, she immediately recognized them. They were the people who had abandoned her in the face of disaster and ran off alone. A few heavy slaps came flying over. Huai Zhu shouted angrily, "Heartless dogs, I'll deal with you guys when we get back." Chapter 5777. The maidservants did not dare to retort. They lowered their heads and allowed Princess Huai Zhu to slap them. Naturally, they did not dare to make a sound and could only bear it silently. Princess Huai Zhu glared at them fiercely and said coldly, "Why aren't you helping me walk?" Her face hurt so much that she did not even know how her face was now. She was anxious and panicked. She really wanted to look in a mirror right now to see how her face was. Her face was the most precious thing to her. If it was damaged or disfigured, how was she going to live in the future? The maidservants scrambled to support her. When they caught up with Mo and the others, they all looked very disheveled and their faces were swollen. Jolin glanced at them and shook her head speechlessly. In the end, she did not say anything. Princess Huaizhu was getting worse and worse. At first, Jolin thought that she was arrogant because she was a princess. But after interacting with her, she found that she was not only arrogant for no reason, but also extremely selfish. Oh, right, she seemed to be a little narrow-minded, especially when she saw Mou speaking to her nicely. The jealousy in her eyes looked like it was about to erupt. Don't think that Shaolin did not understand her gaze. It was an extremely angry and hateful gaze. It was really baffling. Given her and Mou's life-and-death friendship, even 100 Huaizhu could not compare to it. After all, she and Mou had been friends for many years. When Mou and I were training in the army camp, that Princess Huaizhu was cooling off somewhere. Jolin also felt that the more she looked at Princess Huaizhu, the more she disliked her. She was ridiculous and pretentious. No matter how she looked at it, she felt that she was not worthy of Mou. Although Mou was usually a little unreliable, when he was reliable, he was really reliable. Jolin turned around and saw Mou instructing guard Steam Bun in a low voice to inform the local guards to come and clean up the battlefield in Ghost Village. His instructions were meticulous and well-organized. It seemed that Mou had really matured over the years. Mou turned around and saw Shaolin staring at him with a gratified expression, as if she was looking at a child who had grown up. Mou couldn't help but be amused and annoyed. She stepped forward and held her hand, asking, "What's wrong? Did you suddenly realize that this prince is extremely handsome and is one of a kind in this world?" Shaolin rolled her eyes at the sky. "That might not be the case. As far as I know, there are a bunch of people around my sister who are better looking than you. Don't be fooled by how soft the 7 flowers were. They were a flock of orioles and swallows. They looked very good and were comparable to Mou. Mou snorted and continued to boast, "I'm actually not that bad compared to my big brother. My big brother is very handsome, and I am also very handsome." The two of them chatted and laughed as they summoned a flying beast. They soared into the air and sat on it. Once they left the Spectre Village, which was filled with fog, they could take the flying beasts and speed up their return to the capital. Shaolin patrolled the properties all the way back and took a big detour. By the time their group returned to the outskirts of the Mo Kingdom capital, it was already 10 days later. Along the way, Princess Huaizhu didn't like anything she saw, especially when she saw Mou and Shaolin interacting like a couple, chatting and joking with each other along the way. She was so angry that her liver ached. The two of them were so familiar with each other that other people simply couldn't interfere. Huaizhu couldn't vent her anger. Now that the Mo Kingdom capital was right in front of her eyes, she couldn't help but feel invigorated. Returning to the Mo Kingdom capital meant that she had found a sense of belonging. No matter what happened, she still had her aunt, which was better than her coming alone. At that time, with her aunt backing her up, she would definitely think of a way to teach Shaolin a lesson. Along the way, she was simply about to be angered to death by this Shaolin. Relying on His Highness the Crown Prince's favor, she flaunted her prowess in front of her all day long. She would let her know who was the true proud daughter of heaven. A little lass who came from some mountain village actually dared to steal her, Princess Huaizhu's man. She simply didn't know what was good for her. On the outskirts of the Mo Kingdom capital, Mou and Shaolin were mounted on a horse by themselves. Slowing down, they leisurely rode in the direction of the Mo Kingdom capital. Shaolin swept a glance at Princess Huaizhu, who wasn't far behind her, and asked curiously, "Why haven't I seen anyone from the Li Kingdom recently?" Weren't the Li Kingdom's people still jumping up and down, wanting to snatch the princess? Why haven't they seen their shadows recently? Mou smiled faintly. The closer we get to the capital, the more they don't dare to come over. After all, the Mo Kingdom capital's strength was there for all to see. If the Li Kingdom's people wanted to cause trouble, they had to check their own strength first. Otherwise, they would be coming to throw away their lives. Shaolin nodded and turned to glance at Princess Huaizhu again. "Don't you feel that this woman is becoming more and more strange recently?" Ever since they had a falling out at the king's undead village, Princess Huaizhu had been holding her head high every time she saw her, her expression full of disdain. She seemed to have restrained herself a little these past few days. Moreover, she frequently ran to Mou to curry favor and completely ignored her. It was as if she, Xiao Lin, was just an invisible person, not worth a second glance at all. Mou couldn't be bothered to pay attention to that Princess Huaizhu. She turned to Xiao Lin and said, "Ignore her. She just feels that since we're about to return to the capital, noble Consort Li will support her, so she can straighten her back a little." Xiao Lin shook her head. She was somewhat speechless, but she didn't say anything in the end. When the group arrived outside the Mo Kingdom capital, they heard many people talking enthusiastically about the return of His Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess. Only then did they know that their unreliable elder sister and elder brother had already returned to the capital. They were actually one step ahead of their group. The two exchanged glances, receiving a hint of helplessness from each other's eyes. With Mou around, the group naturally galloped into the capital without any obstruction. After entering the capital, Xiao Lin didn't plan on entering the palace with Mou. Instead, she first returned to her own residence to take a look. Changle Avenue had already recovered its bustling appearance. Along the way, they saw a bustling crowd with people coming and going. At this time, the crisis of the zombie scourge had already been resolved, and the people of the Mo Kingdom capital had already resumed their previous lives. There was also no trace of panic or anxiety on their faces. It was as if the zombie scourge from a few years ago was only a big dream. When Xiao Lin returned home, she saw that the old residence's servants were already waiting there. Seeing her return, they hurriedly went up to greet her with a smile, saying, "Eldest Miss said early in the morning that Second Miss would definitely return in the next 2 days and had us prepare to welcome you. Second Miss has worked hard on the journey. Hot meals and hot water have all been prepared. Miss, do you want to eat and rest for a while first, or immediately enter the palace after bathing?" Chapter 5778. Jolin smiled and waved her hand. "There's no need for such trouble. I'll go back to my room to rest. If there's anything else, we can talk about it later." The servants naturally agreed and politely escorted her over. Jolin wasn't too tired on the way here. After all, they had been walking and stopping, and Mou had taken her through many twists and turns, so they hadn't been in a hurry. Moreover, with her current physique, she wouldn't be too tired even if they traveled for 3 to 5 days without rest. Jolin didn't mention it again. Moreover, when Xiao Mu and her entourage returned to the palace, they naturally alarmed everyone from top to bottom. The two of them first went to visit Empress Dowager Ming. After chatting for a while, they rushed to visit Empress Xiao. Thus, the old king carried the dignity of a father and waited left and right in his bedchamber. He waited all the way until the evening lanterns were lit, but he still didn't see his son and daughter-in-law bringing his precious grandson over for the old king to take a look. The old great king couldn't hold it in anymore and hurriedly had someone prepare a carriage. He planned to go to Empress Zhao's brilliant sun hall to see what was going on. He didn't expect that as soon as he stepped out of the door, he would see a group of carriages with beaded curtains and luxurious canopies approaching. Imperial concubine Li from Pearl Flower Palace gracefully got off the carriage and bowed to the old great king. She said in a delicate voice, "Greetings to the great king." The old great king's eyes narrowed into a straight line. "Beloved concubine, why are you here?" This concubine heard that the former crown prince and crown princess have returned to the palace. "I thought I should come and see them." As she spoke, a trace of surprise appeared in her eyes. "What? The couple didn't come to visit the great king?" The old great king coughed lightly, a trace of embarrassment appearing on his face. She really touched a sore spot. Imperial concubine Li covered her mouth with a cloud-embroidered handkerchief and revealed a shocked expression. This concubine has also heard of the former crown prince and crown princess behavior. Rumor has it that those two are very powerful people, Who would have thought that even the great king would not be taken seriously? When the old great king heard this, he was immediately displeased. Usually, imperial concubine Li was soft and gentle, but today she actually slandered his son and daughter-in-law in front of him. The old king expressed that these words were extremely unpleasant to hear, and his countenance immediately sank. Li Ruiying had a smug look on her face. She thought that the great king had been moved by her words and had developed a grudge against the former crown prince and the crown princess. Unexpectedly, the great king flicked his sleeves and stepped onto the carriage. He angrily said, "Set off, we're going to the brilliant Sun Hall." He actually swaggered off just like that, ignoring her completely. Li Ruiying was dumbfounded. She had never seen the great king drag her here without saying more than a few words. Was the great king angry at her? Imperial concubine Li was so angry that her steps swayed slightly. A middle-aged palace maid beside her hurriedly reached out to support her. She sighed and advised, "Your Highness, didn't this servant already tell you that the great king's love for his son is obvious to all? It's truly unwise for you to slander those two in front of the great king. Those two have prominent statuses now, so it's best to befriend them. Even if we don't become friends, there's no need to become enemies." Li Ruiying secretly clenched the silk scarf, anger welling up in her heart. The great king wouldn't have treated me like this before. Now, he's actually abandoning me here for the sake of an adopted son? That middle-aged palace maid hurriedly advised, "Your Highness, the great king is kind-hearted and spoils his children. It's not like you don't know this. Previously, when you went against the crown prince, didn't you also suffer losses time and time again? Why do you have to feel sorry for yourself? You clearly know that the great king has this kind of personality, but you insist on enraging him. Your Highness, this servant has already told you that the most important thing for you right now is to have a son of your own. Only then can you truly gain a foothold in the inner palace. You're still so young. There's still plenty of time in the future." But Li Ruiying still felt disgruntled. "You also saw just now how miserable my Huaizhu was because of them. The crown prince completely disregards me." The middle-aged palace maid advised, "The crown prince is powerful, and the court is impregnable. Why does your Highness want to strike a stone with an egg?" In this servant's opinion, there are many heroes and talents in Northern MO, and there are also many young talents. Why does your Highness insist on tying Princess Huaizhu to the crown prince? If the crown prince has no intention of marrying the princess, who can force him? With the great king's love for his son and Empress Zhao's ability to protect her, your Highness, it's best if you don't shift your thoughts to the crown prince's marriage. How is my Huaizhu very inferior? Could it be that she isn't worthy of Northern Prince Mo? The more Li Ruiying spoke, the angrier she became. She gritted her teeth and said, "You also saw it just now?" Fortunately, the bones on Huaizhu's face were not injured. Just the small wounds on her face will take at least half a month to completely heal. The crown prince went to pick up Huaizhu, and the two of them came back together. This should have been a matter of course. But that former crown princess' younger sister interfered. "Heh, they want to snatch him from me. Your Highness." The middle-aged palace maid turned to look in alarm and moved to cover her mouth. "Your Highness, be careful with your words. I just can't tolerate this." Li Ruiying angrily said, "Third aunt, you don't need to advise me. I know what to do next." The middle-aged palace maid named Third Aunt was startled by imperial concubine Li's resolute expression. She opened her mouth and wanted to persuade her again, but she saw imperial concubine Li turn around and board the carriage, coldly ordering, "Go to brilliant Sun Hall. Your Highness, please think thrice before you act." Third Aunt was so anxious that her forehead was covered in sweat. She had a bad premonition in her heart. She felt that her Highness noble consort, Li, was courting death. Now that she was in a brilliant Sun Hall, it was too obvious that she was looking for trouble. Just now, the great king was already unhappy, but he didn't reprimand her Highness noble consort because of their past relationship. Now that her Highness noble consort was rushing to Her Majesty the Queen's brilliant Sun Hall, if she said something excessive, Even if the great king didn't punish her, Her Majesty the Queen could punish her on the spot. What was the point of this? Third Aunt was very clear that Her Highness Noble Consort Li's stubborn temper was acting up again. Although she hadn't been in the palace for long, she had always been doted on by the great king. Therefore, she was somewhat unable to put herself in her place. Third Aunt had also advised her many times, both overtly and covertly. The great king greatly respected Empress Zhao and was very fond of the current crown prince. If there was no reason, it was best not to provoke him. If there was a problem, it was best to secretly swallow her anger back into her stomach. Besides, Empress Zhao's maternal family was powerful and the crown prince's foundation was solid. He really wasn't someone that an insignificant consort from a foreign country like her could contend against. However, Her Highness Noble Consort had a stubborn temper. Now that she insisted on standing up for Princess Huaizhu, it could be assumed that today's matter wouldn't be settled peacefully. Third Aunt was on tenterhooks as she followed behind Noble Consort Li. As she approached the entrance of Brilliant Sun Hall, she opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, she saw Noble Consort Li walk in with her head held high. Chapter 5779. The Brilliant Sun Hall was filled with laughter. The old great king was holding little Mo Xiao in his arms, grinning from ear to ear. His little grandson was simply a replica of his son when he was young. He was chubby and cute, and the old great king was very fond of him. Greetings to the great king and queen. After Li Ring entered, she bowed politely and looked smilingly at Arbor, who was sitting next to the queen and chatting. This is the famous former crown princess, right? Empress Zhao took her daughter-in-law's hand, and her smiling face slowly turned cold. She looked unkindly at the old great king, who was holding his grandson with a message in her eyes. Look at how unpresentable the bitch you doted on is. No manners. Empress Zhao coldly reprimanded. Why aren't you coming to greet His Majesty and Her Majesty? Li Ruiying gritted her teeth and looked in the direction of the old great king with her watery eyes. As the great king's favorite concubine, she was the concubine mother of the former crown prince and crown princess. Now Empress Zhao didn't give her any face in front of the great king and even asked her to greet the younger generation. Where did this logic come from? Unexpectedly, the great king was playing happily with the little dumpling and didn't even glance at her. Li Ruiying was furious, and her face turned green and white, then white and gray, and a trace of hatred flashed through her eyes. Damn it! She had tried many times before, but the great king, who usually doted on her, was as timid as a little mouse in front of Empress Zhao and the Empress Dowager. He wasn't willing to stand up for her at all. Her Majesty, although the former crown prince and crown princess are now the emperor and empress of Shenzhou, aren't they still juniors in front of you? Empress Zhao sneered at her. Of course they are in front of me, but you aren't. This woman, Li Ring, rashly barged into her Brilliant Sun Hall and still wanted her to give her a good face? Was he still dreaming? The great king couldn't help but cough and say, Imperial concubine, don't be rude. Quickly, greet His Majesty and Her Majesty of the Divine Land. The old great king kept winking at Li Ruiying, urging her to quickly greet him. He was hinting to Empress Li, you must not seek death. Great king. Li Ruiying twisted her body unrelentingly. Just as she was about to act coquettishly and say something, she felt her body fly out inexplicably. Arbor couldn't stand the pretentious look on their faces and directly sent them out of the hall with a vine. Li Ruiying rolled onto the stone floor outside the door. Only then did she realize that someone had actually chased her out of the door. Your Highness. Third Aunt was so frightened that her heart almost jumped out her chest. His old eyes were about to split open. She quickly ran to Li Ruiying's side and helped her up with trembling hands. Li Ruiying was currently in a daze. She supported her third aunt's hand and supported her delicate body as she stood up unsteadily. Great king! Li Ring, who had finally realized that she had been sent flying out of the door, let out a cry of grievance that reached the depths of her bones. She weakly twisted through the door and squeezed out several drops of tears from her bright eyes. Before she could finish saying, "Great king, you have to get justice for Chinchilla," she was sent flying again, powerless to reverse the situation. The king reached out to touch his forehead. He already told her not to seek death in front of the little crown princess. What was going on? Why couldn't she understand this great king's words? Why couldn't she understand the look that the great king was giving her? "Shut up," the great king angrily shouted as he stood up and walked towards the door. "I didn't call you over. Who told you to come to the brilliant Sun Hall on your own?" The great king's back was facing Yin, Arbor, and the others as he angrily shouted at Imperial Concubine Li. At the same time, he continuously winked at Imperial Concubine Li, meaning for her to hurry up and get out of here before things get out of hand. However, Li Ruiying couldn't understand the great king's meaning at all. Seeing the great king giving her a look, Li Ruiying cried out even more aggrievedly, "Great king, the former crown princess was so rude in front of you." Before Li Ruiying could finish her sentence, she found that the great king had actually kicked her. The unprepared imperial concubine Li fell out of the hall with a stupefied expression. "Your Highness!" Third Aunt cried out in alarm and rushed forward to help her up. However, the great king angrily shouted at her, "You blind thing! Master is fooling around. Don't you know how to persuade her? All of you scram back to Pearl Flower Palace. Without our order, no one is allowed to come out." Li Ruiying was still in a daze when she was kicked out. She hadn't even finished what she wanted to say before the great king personally ordered her to be kicked out. This was something that had never happened before. When had the great king ever spoken to her so harshly? "Your Highness, please don't be like this." Third Aunt was so anxious that her white hair was about to pop out. Her Highness couldn't see it clearly, but she could see it clearly. Previously, the great king had been constantly winking at Imperial Concubine Li. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. He was telling Imperial Concubine Li to stop making trouble. If she continued, even the great king wouldn't be able to save her Highness. Unfortunately, Imperial Concubine Li was blind and didn't see the great king's twitching eyes. She just kept crying and making a fuss. The great king had no choice but to personally kick Imperial Concubine Li out. This was to save Imperial Concubine Li's life. Third Aunt opened her mouth to speak, but she heard two intermittent voices coming from outside the corridor. "Imperial Concubine Li will be unlucky, right? I just saw her ride straight to the brilliant Sun Hall. The young crown princess definitely won't allow her to be so impudent." Li Ruiying clenched her fists in anger. How could a few palace maids casually criticize her master behind her back? Speaking of which, when Imperial Concubine Zheng fought with a young crown princess, she couldn't last more than a few moves. How pitiful. I heard that in the end, not even her bones were left. She even had the infamy of being an evil concubine who brought disaster to the country. Each sentence fell into Li Ruiying's ears, instantly calming down her explosive emotions. Although her fists were still tightly clenched, Li Ruiying suppressed her emotions and calmed herself down. When she returned to her Pearl Flower Palace, she said to Third Aunt, "Previously, the people in the palace were all tight-lipped about Consort. No one mentioned her. Go find those two gossipy palace maids and ask around. Once you're done, punish those two for me." Third Aunt's face was full of worry. "Imperial Concubine, the great king wanted to protect you, so he let you leave quickly. In this old servant's opinion, Imperial Concubine shouldn't go against those two from the divine prefecture. They've entered the palace." A delicate rebuke came from behind the curtain. Princess Huaizhu lifted the bead curtain and hurried to Li Ruiying. She called out in surprise, "Aunt, what happened to you? Why was her aunt dirty all over and her hair disheveled?" She looked like she had been beaten up. Li Ruiying smiled awkwardly. "Aunt, I'm fine. Why are you here?" Princess Huaizhu took her hand and said, "Just now, I heard from Aunt that the sister of that village woman, Xiao Lin, has entered the palace." "Xiao Lin has also entered the palace? Are they here to discuss the marriage with the crown prince?" Chapter 5780. Li Ruiying looked embarrassed. She didn't know how to explain it to her niece. She hadn't even said a few words before she was kicked out. Thinking of this, she was still angry, but she calmed down a lot. Princess Huaizhu tugged at Li Ruiying's sleeve and said coquettishly, "Aunt, I heard that the Empress Dowager is holding a banquet tonight to welcome them. What do you think?" Li Ruiying's expression changed, and her eyes darkened. Even her niece, who had just entered the palace, knew about the Empress Dowager's banquet, but the news didn't reach her. Obviously, she wasn't invited. The more Li Ruiying thought about it, the angrier she became. She pushed Third Aunt, "Go out and ask around. I want to know the truth." Third Aunt looked at Huaizhu hesitantly. She didn't want to leave Empress Li now. She knew Princess Huaizhu's personality very well. Third Aunt was worried that if she went out, Empress Li would be instigated by Princess Huaizhu with ulterior motives. It wasn't easy for Empress Li to have her current status. Third Aunt naturally didn't want Empress Li to court death. Third Aunt didn't dare to disobey Li Ruiying's orders. She hurried out to find the two maids who had been gossiping and found out everything from them. The two maids didn't expect that their conversation would be overheard by Empress Li, who was passing by. They were so scared that they trembled and knelt down to beg for mercy. Third Aunt didn't punish them. She just warned them coldly. "Empress Dowager is kind and will forgive you this time. The next time you talk nonsense, I'll cut off your tongues." The two maids cowered and nodded repeatedly. After Third Aunt returned, she reported everything to Li Ruiying and said that she had already punished the two maids. Li Ruiying naturally didn't care about the two lowly maids. Third Aunt said that they were punished, so she let the matter go. Third Aunt said worriedly, "From the looks of it, even that lofty noble consort Zheng was dealt with by the former crown prince consort. It's clear that the former crown princess is powerful. Your Highness, if it's not necessary, it's best that we don't fight them." Third Aunt advised earnestly. The former crown prince and crown princess are now the honorable emperor and empress of the divine prefecture, so they naturally won't stay on Seacone planet for long. Just bear with it for now. Once they leave, you won't have to be humble anymore. However, Li Ruiying felt indignant. "You asked me to be patient at every turn, but others may not take us seriously." Huaizhu, who was listening at the side, was already impatient. Now that she heard her aunt say this, she hurriedly nodded and said, "That's right. Moreover, would you believe what others say? How many years has it been since that Consort Zheng incident? How do you know that there's no other reason for her death?" Moreover, it is said that the two of them are from the divine prefecture and have extremely noble statuses. But who knew if it was true or not? We've never been to the upper three prefectures. Isn't that what they say? Third Aunt was shocked and looked at Huaizhu with an unkind gaze. "Princess, you're wrong. Didn't you say before that Miss Jolin's cultivation level is outstanding? Although this old servant cultivation level is inferior, I at least know how to observe. Those two nobles from the divine prefecture are different from ordinary people at first glance. This old servant simply can't sense their cultivation level from their appearance. Aunt, your majesty, please reconsider." Third Aunt lowered her head and persuaded. "Just look at the great king's attitude today. If something really happens, your majesty will have to bear all the consequences. It's impossible for the great king to help you." Li Ruiying, whose head was feverish from being shaken by Huaizhu, suddenly sobered up and thought that her aunt's words were true. The great king completely ignored her existence today. If she really offended those two from the divine prefecture, she reckoned that the great king wouldn't protect her at all. Instead, he'd kick her out and hand her over to someone else to deal with. When she thought of this, Li Ruiying felt unbearably stifled. She reached out her hand to cover her chest, looking flustered and out of breath. Third Aunt saw that her mind was finally clear and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She leaned close to her and whispered, "Your Majesty, there's a precedent. We must not follow in Consort Zheng's footsteps." Princess Huaizhu glared at her and was about to say something to turn the tide when hurried footsteps came from outside. Your Majesty, The great king's edict has come down. He's marrying our princess to the third son of Duke Qing's mansion, Shi Guangjin. Consort opened her mouth wide. Before she could react, she heard Princess Huaizhu scream. She turned around and saw that Princess Huaizhu had fainted from anger. Shi Guangjin. Arbor glanced at Mo Lien in astonishment. Mo Lien understood that his little wife's confused eyes meant that she didn't remember this person at all. Coughing lightly, Mo Lien grasped her small hand in passing. It's that person who tried to crash into your carriage on the first day of a new year and even taught you a lesson. The little stoic immediately understood after hearing such a vivid description. So it's him. Why would the old great king betroth that princess of the hoarding kingdom to Shi Guangjin? It was a bit baffling. You are personally going to propose it, Emolian said expressionlessly. She told royal father that the third young master of the Shi family hasn't married for so many years and has become a sore point for Duke Qing. Oh, the little stoic responded. Our dear Mo Xiao, who was sitting on the carpet and playing with pills, lifted his chubby chin and glanced at his mother before solemnly looking at his father. He didn't know if it was his misconception, but he felt that his biological father was unable to continue the conversation. After his mother said, "Oh," his biological father's voice caught, "Do you still remember Wu Xiaosu?" Arbor looked at the man in bewilderment. Who? Emolian. He really couldn't continue chatting with his wife. She said she didn't remember anything when he asked her. But that was true. Back then, Yu Xiu had spent a lot of effort to make the little crown princess remember what his face looked like, so as to avoid being confused with the other hidden guards. It's fine if you don't remember. In any case, she's an unimportant person. Mo Yin rubbed her head, exasperated. Yuer said that Shi Guangjin has been obsessed with that Wu Xiaosu for so many years, so it's time for him to find someone to spend his days with. Arbor responded with an "oh" again. She didn't feel anything when she heard it. In any case, it was just a matter between a few idle people, so she just listened and let it pass. Knock, knock, knock. Someone lightly knocked on the door. Arbor curved her lips. Come in. The little monk answered and entered, followed by the little monkey who was looking around. Benefactress. Sister. Emolian glanced at the little monk warningly. The little monk was 8 years old this year, and the baby fat on his face had shrunk a lot, revealing some of the Mo family's excellent looks. With the appearance of a mature and prudent little adult, he cupped his hands at Arbor. Mother. Arbor responded seriously with a stoic little face and waved at him. What's the matter? Mother. I plan to go out alone and gain experience all over planet Seacombe. I think I can also gain some experience. The little monk couldn't help but wrinkle his nose as he spoke. But the little monkey insists on going with me. The little monkey reached out and punched his bald head. Did I discuss it with you? I'm ordering you to go with me as your little monkey's aunt. Emolian. Little Mo Xiao tumbled and crawled over. He sprawled on the ground and hugged the little monk's calf, repeatedly calling out, Big brother, take me with you." A bit of awkwardness appeared on his empty little face. What was going on? He was going out alone, and there were more and more people. Arbor's little face was taut as she forcibly suppressed her smile. She raised her hand to rub the little monk's bald head. Why did you think of going out to gain experience? It's better to travel 10,000 miles than to read 10,000 books. The world is so big. I want to see it. Emolian, look at you. You're just too free. The little monk clasped his hands together and looked like an old man. Following by father and mother's side, a baby eagle will never grow up. On the side, little Mo Xiao looked at him with adoration and nodded like he was pounding garlic. Mo Lien grumpily pulled her son up from the ground. Go play somewhere else. There's no place for you. Wait until you stop wetting the bed. Then you can learn from your big brother. Little Mo Xiao's eyes widened. When did I wet the bed? Before he could finish speaking, he was thrown onto the bed by his tyrannical father and rolled around. Umitba. The little monk nagged. Benefactress, take care of your bandit husband. Arbor. The little monkey on the side almost laughed out loud. He hopped in front of Arbor and swung her arm. Little big sister, let us go. Kong Kong wants to go out to gain experience, so there won't be any danger if I accompany him. On Seacone Planet, with their strength, they could do whatever they wanted. Of course, there wouldn't be any danger. Arbor just couldn't bear to part with him. We're going to the Holy Region in a while. Don't you plan to go with us? Kong Kong shook Little Light's head and waved his hand. Meeting is fate, parting is also fate. Benefactress, don't be sad. We'll meet again one day. Arbor wanted to hit him. You can't change your freaking habit of biting words since you were young, right? Benefactress, this young monk won't be by your side, so you have to take care of your body and take care of your bandit husband. Don't go out and stir up trouble, and don't quarrel with your bandit husband over trivial matters. MMPH. 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 Kong Kong glared at Mo Lien, who reached out to cover his mouth. The two of them being so rowdy actually diluted the thoughts of parting quite a bit. Arbor rubbed the little monk's head and said lovingly, "You've grown up and should have your own thoughts. Go and walk whatever path you want. You have father and mother to take care of everything." The little monk blinked his eyes before abruptly pouncing forward into Xiao Mu's embrace. Arbor rubbed his bald little head and suddenly remembered that many years ago she knocked on the door of the ancient temple in the long, sparse forest. The door opened, and an old monk stood at the door, dragging the little monk. The little monk was about 4 years old. His little face was pink and white, and his chin was round and bulging. He was very shy when he saw strangers and shrunk behind the old monk's waist. Only his bald little head peeked out to look at her curiously. It had already been many years. A baby eagle would eventually spread its wings and fly. That night, Mou came to find his elder brother and sister-in-law, and the three of them chatted for half the night. Outsiders didn't know what they talked about. They only knew that the next day, the great king's marriage edict went to the Qiao residence and was delivered to second Miss Qiao. Xiao Lin was cursing while holding the marriage edict when Mou suddenly popped his head out of the window and grinned at her. Second Miss Qiao pointed at Mou and was about to speak when the boy suddenly jumped in front of her and smiled at her mischievously. "Let's get to know each other, Second Mississippi. Your future husband, Mou." Xiao Lin couldn't keep a straight face and burst into laughter. She gave him a punch in passing. "If you want to be this lady's husband, you'll have to fight first. You're leaving so soon. You've only been back for 2 days." Empress Zhao grumbled as she pulled her son's hand and looked at him reproachfully. Empress Dowager Meng sat on the side with a trace of reluctance in her eyes. "Mother, grandmother, you don't have to worry. It's very convenient to go to China and Seacone Planet now. We can come back whenever we want." The old great king chuckled. That's right. You is getting married in 6 months. At that time, my son and the others will definitely come back." Empress Zhao thought that this was indeed the case, and she felt even happier. Emolian smiled and said to Empress Zhao, "Mother, don't worry. We'll come back early for you Er's wedding. We definitely won't miss the auspicious date." Okay. Empress Zhao agreed with a smile. Everyone chatted for a while. That afternoon, Arbor and Mo Lien left the capital. Xiao Lin stayed in the capital to prepare for the wedding. Arbor sent a message to Yu Xiao and the others, asking them to escort Xiao Zhongbong, Wei Ziqin, and the others back and help Xiao Lin prepare. Everyone was about to board Qi Xiao blue waves when they saw Arbor staring at a mountain peak not far away. "What is it? Look!" Jojo raised her hand and pointed at the sky. Ma Shichan exclaimed in surprise. "Ah, it's a spiritual bird? It's rare to see a spiritual beast in the lower star domain." Duan Yu looked in that direction. "It seems like it. Let's go." Arbor's eyes brightened, and she soared into the sky with a whoosh, flying towards that mountain peak. Her speed was extremely fast, and she arrived at the mountain peak in the blink of an eye like a wisp of smoke. They saw a man in his early 50s with a refined appearance, dressed in a plain blue robe, commanding a group of disciples to attack that spiritual bird on the mountain peak. The fire the spiritual bird spat out was mighty and powerful. Even with so many people, they were still a bit flustered. Thankfully, that middle-aged man's cultivation was about to break through to the spiritual realm, so the situation was still under control. Arbor's eyes brightened, and she skipped over to greet him. Good person, Valley Master, what a coincidence. Mo Yin and Duan Yu looked at each other in surprise. It was common knowledge that Jojo had a bad memory. It wasn't that she had a bad memory. It was just that she was unwilling to remember the faces of many irrelevant people. So it was indeed not easy for her to remember their faces and even call them by their names. The man called the good person Valley Master turned around in bewilderment. When he saw Arbor and the group of people behind her, his eyes involuntarily widened. You? You are our little junior sister? A pleasantly surprised voice came from behind the good person Valley Master. When Dan quickly ran to Arbor's side and exclaimed with a laugh, "It really is your little junior sister. You've returned? Senior sister one." Arbor turned and nodded at her. "I've returned. Who is this?" Mai Shurchen asked in bewilderment. "Oh, this is Shishao Valley's Valley Master, whom Jojo met when she participated in the 3-sex and 5-faction competition back then." Duan Yu's gaze also showed a hint of reminiscence. Back then, the 12-year-old Jojo was so fierce. He stood out in the 3-sex and 5-factions competition and stunned everyone. Heavens, we haven't seen little junior sister in 7 to 8 years, right? Everyone was full of smiles as their gazes landed on the little dumpling who was looking up at them. "Little junior sister, this is your son?" He was too similar to Prince Mo. His soft and adorable little dumpling face really made one want to pinch it. Shishao Valley's Valley Master. "Children, did you forget something?" "Attention!" Shishao Valley's Valley Master shouted. When he saw the spiritual bird charging over, it opened its beak and spat out a blaze. Arbor turned her head to glance at it. The fire-spitting spiritual bird abruptly froze in midair. The good person Valley Master and his group looked on helplessly as that incomparably ferocious spiritual beast fell stiffly like a log and smashed onto the ground with a thump. Shishao Valley's Valley Master inexplicably twitched his mouth. Why did he feel like that spiritual bird was very human-like, and that it had completely been scared out of its wits by the little stoic and fell down? When everyone saw that the spiritual beast had fallen down on its own, they hastily rushed up and tied it up tightly in a flurry of hands and feet. A Shishao Valley disciple muttered to himself, "How strange. I just fought with it for half a day, and it's very ferocious. Are you out of strength now?" Arbor took out 3 storage talismans filled with items and stuffed them into Shishao Valley's Valley Master's hands. "Good person Valley Master for you. You can activate them with a drop of blood. Right now, my holy water sect has reopened in the Divine Province. I've found Second Ant Master and the other senior sisters. If there's a chance, we can return to Shishao Valley for a reunion." Good person Valley Master. There were only 2 of the 5 factions left. If it was the 3 sects reunite at Shishao Valley again, could the 3 sects properly make friends? Could they not bite each other? Good person Valley Master. Time is limited today, so let's part here. Let's meet again another day. Luo Jinyong nodded ruefully. After bidding farewell to the little girl and the others, even Valley Master Luo was shocked to the point of dizziness when he opened the 3 storage talismans the little girl gave him. As when Dan watched the figure of the scarlet waves gradually receding into the distance, the image of the little girl standing on Qingluan's back seemed to appear in his mind again. Her belt fluttered as she expressionlessly cupped her fists and bowed, slightly, to everyone. Good person Valley Master, senior brothers and sisters of Shishao Valley, I, Arbor, will remember today's favor in my heart. When we meet again in the future, I will definitely repay this favor. Farewell. Her lips curled into a faint smile. How wonderful. Little junior sister looked very happy right now, so they were very happy in their hearts. Several years later, Ming Yasi stood at the entrance to the heavenly ice and snow region that never melted all year round and looked up at the pure white valleys on both sides. A group of royal guards followed closely behind him, not daring to breathe loudly. As the ice lion galloped, the large group advanced into the heavenly ice and snow region to kill snow beasts. His Majesty has ordered that if we see a ferret, we must capture it alive." Everyone responded, but they couldn't help but mutter in their hearts. His Majesty comes to the heavenly ice and snow region to hunt every year and wants to capture a small ferret alive every year. What kind of strange complex is this? Late at night that day, seeing Ming Yasi standing on a mountain for a long time without returning to his tent, Gu Ying took a robe and draped it over him. She stood beside him with her head lowered, not daring to say anything. "Is there news?" Gu Ying only dared to nod and respond softly when she heard his question. "Has she given birth?" Gu Ying hurriedly shook her head. "Why hasn't she given birth yet?" Ming Yasi said angrily. "What a useless man. He only gave birth to a boy after so many years. I'm afraid he can't do it." Gu Ying was speechless. "Your Majesty, whatever you say, I hope you can say this in front of His Majesty of the Divine Continent." Actually, Gu Ying really wanted to ask this lord, after so many years, why do you keep paying attention to whether those two from the Divine Continent have a daughter or not? Whether they give birth or not has nothing to do with you, right? How would Gu Ying know that when Ming Yasi couldn't fall asleep, he would turn over and sit up, gnashing his teeth as he muttered to himself, "My son, the eagle of the grasslands, will marry your daughter and avenge me. You made me heartache my entire life, so I also want you to have a taste of heartache. If you can't obtain my love, then who you marry and how many children you have with whom are all out of Ming Yasi's consideration." A certain person carried this belief with him every day and waited year after year. He gradually had more sons, but that couple was neurotic and just didn't give birth to a daughter. Wasn't this worrying? Achoo! Arbor rubbed his small nose and poked his small head out of the pavilion to look at the two people playing chess nearby. Someone must be speaking ill of Jojo behind his back. The little stoic stared at those two people for a long time before she couldn't resist taking out a bead and tossing it over. Yin was just considering what to do when he caught the bead with his fingers and turned to look at her. At this time, Yu, that guy, slapped down his other hand with a smack, and his black piece landed on the chessboard. "You cheated," Yu expressionlessly said. "All is fair in war." Seeing that those two were about to start fighting again in a dogfight, Xiao Mu stretched out her hand to Yan in boredom. She waved her hand at the 7 flowers, who were currently fishing in the lake. "Come up after you caught a few. We can't eat any more than that." Yu picked up the white pieces one by one from the chessboard and threw them into the box. Then, he played with them. "Did you find out? What exactly did that Ming Yasi guy want to know?" He kept sending people to them day after day, but who knew what he wanted to find out? Yin scowled and grumpily said, "To find out if we gave birth to a daughter." Yu was stunned, and his hand that was fiddling with the pieces paused. Could it be that he was a pervert? Yin harumphed. "He gave birth to so many sons and set his sights on my daughter." Bah, not to mention that he didn't have a daughter right now. Even if he did, he definitely wouldn't give her to him. Arbor heard the word daughter when she walked into the pavilion in the middle of the lake. She blinked and asked, "You guys know?" "What do you mean we know?" The two people looked at her in bewilderment. "Oh, so they didn't know?" Arbor shook her small head and thought. "I was wondering, I didn't tell anyone that I have a daughter." She was afraid that if she told them too early, they would act like lunatics and restrict her freedom every day. Then wouldn't she be annoyed to death? Forget it. She'd talk about it later. On the other side, Hushi-chan and the rest walked over with Xiao, and a basket of fresh seafood. "Let's go. I'll personally cook today and give you guys a sumptuous lake seafood feast." Arbor stood up and waved her small hand. Everyone's mouths twitched, and they quickly followed behind her and called out, "Jojo, I'll do it. Don't be busy." Right, I'll do it. Arbor turned a deaf ear to them and strode away as if she was flying. Making food you like and giving it to the person you like to eat, this was simple happiness. Everyone, "Mommy, they're playing rock, paper, scissors in the back." Before the little dumpling could finish shouting, Hee-chan covered her mouth. "Rock, paper, scissors. Whoever loses will eat more." Arbor giggled and walked briskly towards the kitchen. The small path behind her meandered, and the crowd chatted merrily. The setting sun hung high in the sky, illuminating a patch of bright and beautiful gold that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.